Picture this: you're standing in front of a room full of people, about to deliver the most important presentation of your career. Your palms are sweating, your heart is racing, and your mind keeps replaying every possible thing that could go wrong. Or maybe it's not a speech, maybe it's a high-stakes job interview, a make-or-break negotiation, or a moment where everything feels like it's hanging in the balance. We've all been there, that crushing pressure, the weight of expectation, the fear of slipping up when it matters most. But what if I told you there's a 2,000-year-old philosophy that holds the key to not just surviving these moments, but thriving in them? Stoicism, the ancient practice embraced by emperors, warriors, and thinkers, offers a treasure trove of tactics to master your focus when the pressure is at its peak. And here's the thing: these aren't abstract ideas. They're practical, battle-tested tools that can transform how you handle stress, chaos, and uncertainty. Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most famous Stoics, put it perfectly: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's the core of Stoic wisdom. It's not about suppressing emotions or pretending pressure doesn't exist. It's about shifting your perception, taking control of what you can, and letting go of what you can't. Imagine walking into those high-pressure situations with unshakable calm, laser-like focus, and the confidence that comes from knowing you're equipped to handle whatever comes your way. That's not just possible, it's within your reach. In this video, we're diving deep into 44 Stoic tactics to help you cultivate unyielding focus when the stakes are high. We'll break them down into 3 powerful themes: mindset shifts that rewire how you see challenges, preparation strategies that set you up for success before the pressure even hits, and resilience techniques to keep you steady when everything feels like it's falling apart. This isn't just theory, it's a toolkit forged in the fires of real-life adversity, used by everyone from ancient philosophers to modern-day leaders. Whether you're facing a critical moment at work, a personal challenge, or just the everyday stresses that threaten to throw you off course, these tactics will help you stand firm, stay sharp, and navigate any storm with clarity and purpose. So let's begin, because the ability to focus under pressure isn't just a skill. It's a superpower waiting to be unlocked. The first and perhaps most powerful Stoic tactic for unyielding focus is mastering the dichotomy of control, a principle so foundational that Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, opened his famous handbook with it. Here's how it works. Imagine you're an archer drawing your bow. You can control how steadily you stand, how carefully you aim, and the strength with which you release the string. But once that arrow leaves your hand, the wind, a sudden movement of the target, even a bird flying across its path, none of that is up to you. The Stoics observed that most of our stress and distraction comes from confusing these two realms. We exhaust ourselves trying to dictate outcomes, reactions, or external events when our real power lies only in our choices, efforts, and perceptions. Think about the last time you spiraled into anxiety before a big meeting or presentation. How much of that mental energy was spent on what you could actually influence, your preparation, your mindset, versus fixating on how others might judge you, whether the technology would fail, or if some unpredictable question might throw you off? That's the trap. Modern psychology echoes this ancient insight. Studies show that ruminating on uncontrollable factors spikes cortisol levels, while focusing on actionable steps boosts both performance and calm. Here's how to apply this today. Start by mentally categorizing your stressors. Take a blank sheet of paper and draw 2 columns. On the left, list what's truly within your power: your preparation, your attitude, your breathing when nerves hit. On the right, write down what isn't the opinions of others, unexpected delays, past mistakes you can't undo. Then do something radical, cross out the right column. Not because those things don't matter, but because worrying about them is like the archer cursing the wind instead of adjusting their aim. Epictetus put it bluntly, some things are up to us and some are not. When you internalize that boundary, something shifts. High-pressure situations become less about controlling the uncontrollable and more about channeling your energy where it actually makes a difference. So ask yourself now, what's one thing you're over-worrying about that falls squarely in the can't control column? The weather on the day of your outdoor event. A client's mood, the stock market's fluctuations. Write it down, then let it go like that archer's arrow. Your job isn't to command the outcome, it's to master your aim. Now let's turn to the second Stoic tactic, Premeditatio Malorum, or the Premeditation of Evils. At first glance, this might sound pessimistic. Why would anyone willingly imagine things going wrong? But here's the twist, this practice isn't about dwelling on fear, it's about disarming it. The Stoics called it a mental fire drill. By rehearsing challenges in your mind before they happen, you strip away the element of surprise, the sting of the unexpected. Seneca, the philosopher who advised emperors, put it this way: the person who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. Think of a CEO walking into a make-or-break investor pitch. Instead of just visualizing success, a common piece of advice, they take it further. They imagine the projector failing. They picture skeptical faces, tough questions, even outright rejection. But here's the key, they don't stop at the disaster. They mentally walk through their response, how they'll troubleshoot the tech issue, reframe their points, or gracefully handle objections. That's Premeditatio Malorum in action. It's not negative thinking, it's strategic preparation. This stands in stark contrast to the toxic positivity we often see today, the idea that we should only focus on good outcomes and suppress any acknowledgement of difficulty. The problem with that approach, life isn't a highlight reel. When setbacks inevitably come, those who have refused to consider them are blindsided, their confidence shattered. But the Stoic, they're prepared. They've already walked through the worst-case scenario in their mind and come out the other side. Here's how to apply this today. Before your next high-stakes moment, a difficult conversation, a critical performance, a career-defining opportunity, take 5 minutes to ask, what's the worst that could reasonably happen? Then go deeper. How would you adapt? What resources or skills could you rely on? Who could you turn to for support? This isn't about inventing catastrophes. It's about recognizing possibilities and building mental resilience around them. Consider a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. They don't just visualize success, they mentally rehearse complications, rare reactions, equipment failures. By doing so, they're not inviting disaster, they're ensuring they can meet it with calm precision if it arises. That's the power of this practice. It transforms fear from a paralyzing force into a navigable landscape. So next time you feel the weight of an upcoming challenge, don't just hope for the best, prepare for the twists, and discover how much lighter the pressure feels when you've already faced it in your mind. The third Stoic tactic might just be the ultimate reality checker. Marcus Aurelius called it the view from above, and it's like hitting the zoom out button on your mental map. Picture this, you're stuck in traffic, gripping the steering wheel, frustration boiling over because you're going to be late. Now imagine your perspective shifts, you're suddenly viewing your car from a drone's eye view, then higher, until you see the entire city grid. The winding highways, the thousands of other drivers, each with their own urgent reasons for being there. That tiny red car, that's you. The problem that felt enormous moments ago now seems almost comically small against the vast backdrop of human activity. That's the power of this practice. Marcus Aurelius used this technique daily. In his private writings, he'd remind himself to look down on the world from a cosmic vantage point, seeing empires rise and fall, generations come and go, nature's cycles continuing indifferent to human drama. Why? Because when we're drowning in stress, our perspective shrinks to tunnel vision. We inflate trivial slights into catastrophes, treat minor setbacks as existential threats, and forget that most of what consumes us won't matter in a week, let alone a century. The view from above isn't about dismissing your struggles, it's about seeing them in their true proportion. Here's how it works in practice. Next time you're paralyzed by a high-pressure situation, a public mistake, a harsh critique, a missed opportunity, pause and ask, how will this feel in 1 month? 1 year on my deathbed? Or go further, imagine explaining this problem to someone living through war, famine, or real survival struggles. Suddenly, that botched presentation or awkward social interaction loses its fangs. This isn't about guilt tripping yourself into gratitude. It's about recalibrating your emotional scale. Modern science backs this up. Researchers at Stanford found that people who practice temporal distancing, imagining how they'll feel about a problem in the future, experience significantly lower stress responses. It's why astronauts often return from space with the overview effect, a profound shift in priorities after seeing Earth as a fragile blue dot. You don't need a rocket ship to access that clarity. The real magic happens when this perspective collides with ego. Most of our high-pressure moments feel intense because we've made them about us, our reputation, our worth, our fear of being exposed as inadequate. But from the cosmic view, you're a speck in the universe's grand story. That's liberating. It means you can focus on doing your best without treating every outcome as a verdict on your soul. So think back, when has a massive problem shrunk simply by changing your vantage point? That overdue bill, that argument with a friend, that career setback, how much smaller did they seem with time or distance? That's the view from above in action, not minimizing your experience, but maximizing your ability to navigate it with grace. Journaling might seem like a simple habit, but the Stoics treated it as a precision tool for mental clarity, a way to carve through the noise of distraction and sharpen focus like a whetstone on a blade. Marcus Aurelius himself, the most powerful man in the ancient world, scribbled private reflections that would later become meditations, proving that even emperors needed to untangle their thoughts on paper. Here's why this practice is so potent. When pressure mounts, our minds become crowded with half-formed fears, competing priorities, and reactive impulses. Journaling forces those swirling thoughts into the open, where we can examine them under cold, clear light. Take the surgeon from our earlier example. Before stepping into the operating room, they might jot down 3 lines: today's priority, steady hands, calm mind, potential challenge, unexpected bleeding. Reminder, trust your training. That's not just note-taking, it's a mental triage. By externalizing their focus points, they create a roadmap for their attention, ensuring it doesn't scatter when stakes are high. The Stoics knew this instinctively. Seneca wrote letters to himself dissecting his daily missteps. Epictetus had students summarize lessons in writing to cement their understanding. These weren't diaries, they were cognitive filters. Modern research backs this up. Studies show that expressive writing, the act of dumping thoughts onto paper, reduces mental clutter and improves decision-making under stress. It's like defragmenting a hard drive. You're organizing the chaos so your mind can run efficiently. Try this tonight. Instead of ruminating over tomorrow's challenges, answer 2 Stoic-inspired prompts. What's the one thing I must accomplish? And what could distract me, and how will I recenter, keep it brutally short? The goal isn't prose, it's precision. Marcus Aurelius often began his entries with blunt reminders. When you wake up, tell yourself, today I'll meet interference, ingratitude, arrogance. Not to dwell on negativity, but to preemptively disarm it. Your version might look different. Maybe it's a single sentence before a big meeting. They need solutions, not my nerves. Or a post-game debrief. What did I control? What did I waste energy on? The magic lies in the habit's simplicity. You're not writing for an audience. You're creating a silent conversation with your wisest self. So here's a challenge. Grab any scrap of paper right now and answer this question. What's one thought circling my mind that needs to be downloaded onto paper? It could be a nagging doubt, a critical task, or even an irrational fear. Watch what happens when you give it physical form. Suddenly, it's no longer a shadowy weight dragging at your focus. It's just ink on a page, something you can face, manage, or release. That's the Stoic journaling secret. Clarity isn't found in the mind. It's forged on the page. Consider the last time you chose the path of least resistance, scrolling instead of working, hitting snooze instead of rising, opting for convenience over effort. Now imagine doing the opposite, not because you have to, but because you can. That's voluntary discomfort in action, a Stoic practice so counterintuitive yet transformative that Musonius Rufus, the philosopher who trained Epictetus, insisted his students sleep on hard beds and endure cold showers. His reasoning: how can someone accustomed to luxury become rugged? He wasn't advocating misery for its own sake. He was engineering resilience. Every small discomfort willingly embraced is like depositing strength into your mental bank, building reserves for when life demands withdrawals under pressure. Take the modern equivalent, choosing stairs over elevators, fasting between meals instead of snacking, or leaving your phone behind during a walk. These aren't just lifestyle hacks, they're microdoses of adversity. Each one reinforces a critical truth: discomfort is not an emergency. When you voluntarily face minor hardships, you rewire your brain's threat response. The colleague who bikes to work in the rain isn't just saving the planet. They're practicing how to stay composed when a project hits a storm. The parent who resists checking email during family dinner isn't just present, they're conditioning their focus muscles for high-stakes moments where distractions loom. Science validates this ancient wisdom. Studies on stress inoculation show that controlled exposure to discomfort like cold therapy or intermittent fasting lowers baseline anxiety and improves emotional regulation. It's the same principle behind Navy SEAL training. By routinely pushing past comfort zones, you expand your capacity to handle chaos when it matters. But here's the key difference: Stoicism frames this as philosophy, not punishment. You're not suffering to prove toughness. You're practicing the art of detachment from ease so comfort doesn't become a crutch. Start small. Tonight, try turning off the heater for the last minute of your shower. Notice the initial shock, then the realization you're still breathing. You're okay. That's the moment your brain logs a new equation. Discomfort doesn't equal danger. Or tomorrow, take the cramped middle seat on the train instead of waiting for the window. Observe how your mind tries to rationalize avoidance, then override it. These tiny victories accumulate. When real pressure comes, a missed promotion, a public failure, a personal loss, you'll have a reservoir of proof that you can endure more than you think. Musonius Rufus asked his students, if you flee from heat and cold, how will you handle the heat of criticism or the cold shoulders of rejection? That question still echoes. What minor discomfort can you invite today to prepare for tomorrow's inevitable storms? Not to punish yourself, but to discover a liberating truth. You are far more adaptable than your comforts let you believe. Deep within Stoic philosophy lies a concept so powerful it's been called the ultimate mental armor, the inner citadel. Picture a fortress inside your mind, unshakable no matter what chaos rages outside its walls. Marcus Aurelius described it like this: people look for retreats in the countryside, by the coast, or in the mountains, but you can retreat into yourself anytime. Nowhere is more peaceful than when you enter your own soul. That's the essence of this tactic. It's not about physical escape. It's about cultivating an inner sanctuary where focus remains unbroken, even in the storm. You've seen this in action without realizing it. Think of elite athletes in the middle of a championship game, the crowd roaring, the score tied, the pressure crushing. Yet their eyes have that laser focus. They're in what sports psychologists call the zone, but the Stoics would recognize it as the inner citadel at work. Or consider a firefighter charging into a burning building. The flames, the screams, the collapsing beams, none of it breaks their concentration because they've trained to access that calm core where decisions happen with precision. Marcus didn't just theorize about this, he lived it. As emperor, he faced rebellions, plagues, and betrayals. His private journals reveal how he'd mentally withdraw to this inner stronghold. Dig inside yourself. There lies the source of good, ever ready to flow if you keep digging. That's the practice, not ignoring reality, but choosing which parts of it you engage with. When distractions strike, when emotions surge, when pressure mounts, you don't fight the storm. You step into the citadel. Here's what makes this different from simple positive thinking. The inner citadel isn't about replacing negative thoughts with happy ones. It's about creating a neutral space where you observe chaos without being consumed by it. A surgeon doesn't stop noticing complications during an operation. They just don't let panic hijack their hands. A public speaker doesn't ignore the audience's reactions. They simply refuse to let those reactions dictate their delivery. So where's your inner citadel? It might be a phrase you repeat like a mantra Marcus often used, "This too shall pass." It could be a mental image, a literal fortress, a quiet room, or even something symbolic like a mountain peak above the clouds. The key is accessibility. When your boss interrupts your flow with urgent demands, when social media pings with distractions, when self-doubt whispers that you're not good enough, that's when you retreat inward. Not to hide, but to regroup. Modern neuroscience confirms the power of this ancient idea. Studies on mindfulness show that creating mental distance from stimuli, essentially visiting your inner citadel, reduces amygdala activation, the brain's panic button. It's why emergency responders train simulations until their responses become automatic. They're building neural pathways straight to that calm center. Try this today. The next time overwhelm hits, pause for 3 breaths and ask, what would my inner citadel look like right now? Maybe it's imagining yourself as a tree, roots deep while wind whips the branches. Maybe it's recalling a moment when you felt utterly composed. That firefighter doesn't wait for the blaze to start practicing focus. They drill it daily. Your mind deserves the same preparation, because when pressure comes knocking, you won't have time to build a fortress. You'll need to step into one that's already there. There's a phrase that sounds radical until you grasp its power. Amor Fati, love of fate, coined by Nietzsche but steeped in Stoic soil. It's the practice of embracing everything life throws at you, not just enduring setbacks, but welcoming them as essential threads in your story. Picture a tech founder whose app crashes spectacularly on launch day. Servers fail, users rage, investors panic. The easy response: despair, self-blame, maybe even surrender. But Amor Fati flips the script. What if that failure wasn't a disaster, but the exact experience needed to build something better? That founder might realize, without that crash, they'd never have discovered critical flaws in their infrastructure. Without the backlash, they'd have missed the chance to develop crisis management skills that later saved their company. That's Amor Fati in action, seeing the stumble as part of the dance. Epictetus, born into slavery and crippled by a cruel master, could have cursed his fate. Instead, he taught, "Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens happen the way it happens, then you will be happy." That's not passive resignation, it's active alignment with reality. Think of a tree growing on a windy cliff. It doesn't waste energy wishing for calm weather. It uses the constant gusts to grow stronger roots. Every challenge becomes part of its structure. So how do we practice this? Start by mining your last setback for hidden gifts. That project that got cancelled, did it free you for a better opportunity? That relationship that ended, did it teach you boundaries you'll need for future love? Even small inconveniences train this muscle. Traffic jam, chance to listen to that podcast. Flight delayed, bonus time to journal. The key is shifting from "why is this happening to me" to "what is this preparing me for?" History's greatest innovators lived this. Thomas Edison's lab burned down at 67, destroying years of work. His response: "Thank goodness all our mistakes were burned up. Now we can start fresh." He rebuilt better within weeks. Or consider Malala Yousafzai, who transformed an assassination attempt into a global platform for education. These aren't superhumans. They're people who chose to see fate not as an adversary, but as a co-author of their legacy. Here's your challenge. Pick one recent disappointment, a missed promotion, a rejected proposal, even a rainy vacation, and ask, how might this be exactly what I needed? Maybe the rejection spared you from a toxic workplace. Maybe the rain forced you to discover that cozy bookstore you'd have otherwise missed. Amor Fati isn't about pretending pain doesn't hurt. It's about trusting the plot twists are there for a reason. Because when you stop fighting reality and start collaborating with it, pressure loses its bite. You're no longer at the mercy of circumstance. You're in dialogue with it. Imagine standing in a courtroom, about to cross-examine a key witness, when suddenly your heart starts pounding, your palms go damp, and your thoughts begin to race. The instinctive reaction: I'm panicking, I'm going to mess this up. But what if you could step outside that spiral with just 2 words? That's the power of objective naming, a Stoic tactic so simple yet transformative that modern psychology has rebranded it as affect labeling. Here's how it works. When you name an emotion with clinical detachment, "I notice anxiety," instead of "I am anxious," you create a critical gap between yourself and the feeling. You're no longer drowning in the wave, you're observing it from shore. Take that lawyer in the courtroom. By shifting their internal dialogue from "I'm panicking" to "my body feels tense," they accomplish something profound. The first statement fuses identity with emotion, making it feel permanent and all-consuming. The second, it's a temporary physiological state, no more personal than a cramp or a sneeze. Cognitive behavioral therapists call this cognitive distancing, but the Stoics were masters of it 2 millennia ago. Epictetus advised students to say to every harsh appearance, "You are just an appearance, not the truth." That's objective naming in its purest form, disarming emotions by refusing to let them define reality. Science confirms why this works. Brain scans show that verbally labeling emotions reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, while boosting activity in the prefrontal cortex, the rational decision-making hub. It's why seasoned surgeons narrate their own stress responses during high-risk procedures. Hands are shaking slightly, normal adrenaline response. Or why elite athletes describe their nerves before a race. Heart rate, elevated body preparing for action. They're not denying the feeling, they're containing it with language. Try this today. The next time stress hijacks your focus, pause and complete the sentence, "I noticed," followed by the most neutral description possible. I notice my jaw is clenched lands differently than I'm so angry I can't think. I notice thoughts about failure carries less weight than I'm a failure. The moment you name the emotion like a scientist observing a specimen, its grip loosens. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this in his journals, writing not, "I am devastated by betrayal," but "I observe the sensation of betrayal arising." That slight shift in phrasing created just enough space for him to choose his response rather than be ruled by reaction. So here's the challenge. What's one emotion you frequently fuse with frustration, overwhelm, insecurity? Practice describing it today as if you're a journalist reporting facts. Not, "I'm terrified of this presentation," but "I observe a flutter in my stomach and rapid breathing." When you strip away the dramatic labels, you'll find the monster was just a shadow all along. Between every event and your reaction lies a hidden space, and mastering that gap is what the Stoics called the discipline of Assent. Seneca described it as the one thing that brings us peace, stepping back and questioning every impression that comes our way. Picture this: someone cuts you off in traffic, and before you even register the thought, your hand is on the horn, your pulse is racing, your mouth is forming words you'll regret. That's autopilot, but what if, in that sliver of time between their action and your response, you inserted a moment of awareness? That's where your power lies. Modern psychology echoes this with the 10-second rule for anger management, counting to 10 before reacting. But the Stoics took it deeper. They saw this pause not just as a cooling-off period, but as a sacred space for discernment. Every external event, a criticism, a setback, a provocation, first registers as an impression in your mind. The discipline of Assent is about interrogating that impression before granting it permission to become your reality. Is this truly harmful or just inconvenient? Is this person intentionally malicious or perhaps just having a terrible day? Your emotions don't get to decide the answers. Your reasoned judgment does. Consider how this plays out in high-pressure environments. A CEO receives a scathing email from a board member. The immediate impression: attack, threat, humiliation. But with practiced Assent, they pause. They ask, is this feedback entirely false, or is there a kernel of truth I can use? Is my anger protecting my ego or serving the company's best interest? That split-second audit transforms the reaction from defensive fury to measured response. Ancient Stoics trained this skill like athletes. Epictetus had students practice withholding assent even to simple observations. If someone claimed, "It's night," they'd respond, "No, it appears to be night." Seemingly trivial, this drilled the habit of never conflating perception with truth. Today's equivalent might be hearing, "You messed up," and internally reframing it to, "I'm perceiving criticism," creating just enough distance to choose whether that perception deserves your energy. So where do you need more mental space today? Between your coworker's tone and your resentment, between your child's tantrum and your frustration. Try this. For the next 24 hours, institute a 2-breath rule. Before reacting to any emotional trigger, take 2 full inhales and exhales. In that tiny window, ask Seneca's question: is this thing I'm about to say or do necessary? Is it kind? Is it true? You'll discover something revolutionary. Most reactions aren't mandatory. They're habits you've mistaken for inevitabilities. The beauty of this practice is its scalability. Use it when a comment stings your pride or when life delivers a crushing blow. The principle remains: you're not a puppet whose strings get pulled by external events. You're the gatekeeper of your own mind, deciding which impressions deserve to cross the threshold into action, and with each pause you strengthen that gate. There's a practice so counterintuitive that it feels like emotional judo, negative visualization. Not the anxious catastrophizing that keeps you awake at night, but a deliberate, almost meditative exercise in temporary loss. Picture a concert violinist sitting backstage before a performance. Instead of nervously obsessing over finger placement, they close their eyes and imagine opening their case to find the instrument shattered. They feel the gut punch, the sinking dread, then exhale and open their eyes to see the violin intact, perfectly playable. That shift, that's negative visualization in motion. It's not about inviting disaster. It's about vaccinating yourself against taking things for granted by briefly touching the void of their absence. Seneca put it bluntly, "Whatever fortune has raised on high, she lifts only to bring low." The Stoics weren't pessimists, they were realists who recognized that everything we cherish, from relationships to health to possessions, is on loan from fate. Negative visualization strips away the illusion of permanence. Think of it as mental time travel. You visit a future where something precious is gone, not to wallow, but to return to the present with sharper appreciation. A CEO might mentally walk through losing their company before signing a major deal, not to self-sabotage, but to reconnect with the passion that started it all. A parent might picture an empty nest before snapping at their child's messy room, transforming irritation into patience. The critical difference between this and catastrophizing lies in duration and intent. Catastrophizing lingers in loss, spinning endless what-if scenarios that paralyze. Negative visualization visits loss briefly, like dipping a toe in icy water, to reignite gratitude for warmth. Modern research calls this the mental subtraction technique. Studies show people who imagine losing their jobs, partners, or abilities report significantly higher happiness with what they have. Try this today. Pick one ordinary blessing, your morning coffee, your working laptop, the text thread with a friend, and spend 30 seconds envisioning life without it. Feel the absence fully, then return to the present. Notice how the object now seems to glow slightly brighter. Seneca wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." By rehearsing loss, you don't attract it, you disarm its emotional hold. So here's the question: what's quietly enriching your life right now that you'd only miss once it was gone? The hum of your fridge, the neighbor who waves each morning, the unthinking ease of bending to tie your shoes. Negative visualization isn't about dwelling in darkness, it's about using shadows to make the light visible. And in a world that constantly pushes us to want more, this ancient practice offers a radical alternative: to want what you already have. The Stoic pause isn't just a moment of hesitation, it's a deliberate act of reclaiming control, and it begins with something as simple as a breath. Navy SEAL call it tactical breathing. A 4-second inhale, 4-second hold, 4-second exhale, 4-second pause, repeat. This isn't just a stress hack, it's neuroscience in action. When your heart races during conflict or pressure, your prefrontal cortex, the brain's reasoning center, gets hijacked by the amygdala's alarm bells, that rhythmic breathing pattern. It's like sending a direct memo to your nervous system: stand down. The SEAL didn't invent this, they weaponized what the Stoics practiced 2,000 years earlier. Epictetus taught, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. The pause is where that transformation happens. Imagine a teacher in the middle of a heated classroom debate. A student snaps with unexpected disrespect. The immediate reaction might be to escalate, to assert authority with sharp words. But instead, the teacher takes a visible breath, their shoulders dropping slightly. That pause isn't weakness, it's a strategic reset. In those seconds, they might recall Marcus Aurelius' reminder: choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. The student sees composure, not confrontation. The tension diffuses, the lesson continues. That's the Stoic pause in action, a tiny rebellion against reactivity. Here's why this works beyond theory. Research from Harvard Medical School shows that controlled breathing lowers cortisol levels faster than passive relaxation. It's why hostage negotiators use breath cycles before responding to threats, or why surgeons pause and exhale before making the first incision, the common thread. They're not suppressing emotion, they're creating space for choice. Seneca described anger as brief insanity, and the pause is the antidote, the split second where you reclaim sanity. So what's your pause trigger? It could be the moment your inbox pings with a passive-aggressive email, or when your toddler throws a tantrum in the grocery store. Identify those flashpoints, then anchor them to a physical cue, a deep breath, a sip of water, even tapping your thumb and forefinger together. The key is consistency. Like a muscle, the pause strengthens with repetition. Consider the courtroom lawyer who feels their pulse spike during cross-examination. Instead of rushing into the next question, they adjust their glasses, a deliberate gesture that masks their breathwork. That's the art of it, making the pause invisible but impactful, because in high-stakes moments, the person who controls their breath controls the room. Start small today, before replying to that text, before reacting to criticism, before making any decision clouded by emotion. Stop, breathe, then proceed. The gap between stimulus and response might only be a few seconds, but within it lies all your power. Death might seem like an odd focus tool until you consider how sharply a ticking clock clarifies priorities. The Stoics called this Memento Mori, remembering you must die, not as morbid fixation, but as the ultimate lens for cutting through distractions. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do, say, and think. That's the paradox. Confronting life's brevity doesn't paralyze, it propels. Think of Steve Jobs' 2005 Stanford speech after his cancer diagnosis. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to make big choices. Modern productivity gurus echo this with deadline psychology. Parkinson's law states work expands to fill time allotted. Give yourself a week for a task, it'll take a week. Give yourself 2 hours, you'll adapt, but artificial deadlines lack teeth. Memento Mori injects urgency with meaning. A writer staring at a blank page might procrastinate until they ask, if this were my last piece, what truth would I share? Suddenly, fluff falls away. The same principle fuels deathbed visualization, a practice where hospice nurses report patients rarely wish they'd worked more, but often regret time wasted on fear, grudges, or waiting for someday. Here's how to harness this today. Start small. Place a physical reminder where you'll see it daily. A skull ring like Renaissance scholars kept on their desks, an hourglass, or even a sticky note with M.S. Marcus shorthand for Memento Mori. Use it as a trigger before scrolling social media. Ask, is this how I'd spend my final hour? Before avoiding a tough conversation, consider, would this hesitation haunt me? The goal isn't grim obsession, it's using mortality as a whetstone to sharpen presence. Consider 2 architects designing the same building. One operates on autopilot, ticking boxes for client demands. The other asks, if this were my legacy, what would I change? That shift from just another project to potentially my last transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary craft. Your version might not involve blueprints. Maybe it's an email you're drafting, a meal you're cooking, or a bedtime story you're reading. The question remains, does this action deserve a sliver of your limited days? Modern research validates this ancient practice. Studies show Memento Mori reflections reduce trivial distractions by 37% and boost meaningful engagement. It's why some CEOs keep tombstones in their offices, not to depress but to distill. When everything feels urgent, death whispers what's truly important. So tonight, as you turn off the lights, borrow Seneca's ritual. Asleep or awake, we're all walking toward death. Measure life by what deserves your last breath. Then ask, what did today move you closer to or farther from your unlived masterpiece? There's a secret hidden in plain sight within every obstacle, not just a hurdle to overcome, but the very path forward itself. The Stoics called this principle, the obstacle is the way, and it's more than a motivational slogan. It's an alchemical process for transforming leaden setbacks into golden opportunities. Take J.K. Rowling's now legendary rejections. 12 publishers dismissed Harry Potter before one finally said yes. Most would see that as a brutal gauntlet of failure. But Rowling later reflected, rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. Those rejections weren't roadblocks, they were the furnace that tempered her resolve, sharpened her pitch, and ultimately ensured only a publisher truly believing in her vision would take the risk. Marcus Aurelius framed it in even starker terms. The blazing fire makes flames and brightness out of everything thrown into it. That's the essence of this tactic. Adversity isn't something to endure until you reach your goal. It's the raw material for becoming the kind of person who can achieve it. Think of a blacksmith's forge. The metal doesn't complain about the hammer or the heat. It's precisely that pounding and scorching that reshapes it into something stronger, sharper, more valuable. Your obstacles, they're the hammer and the flame. Consider how this plays out in everyday life. The entrepreneur whose funding gets denied isn't facing a dead end. They're being forced to refine their business model, often discovering leaner, more innovative approaches in the process. The athlete sidelined by injury doesn't just recover, they study game theory during rehab, returning with tactical insights their healthy peers missed. Even personal struggles follow this pattern. Heartbreak teaches emotional resilience, financial strain cultivates creativity, professional rejection builds thicker skin and clearer self-awareness. The obstacle isn't just in the way, it is the way. So here's the pivotal question. What challenge are you currently avoiding or resenting that might actually be your greatest teacher? That difficult colleague, they're training you in patience and diplomacy. The bureaucratic red tape, it's schooling you in meticulousness and persistence. The project that feels impossibly complex, it's expanding your capacity for problem solving in ways easy wins never could. History's most resilient figures internalized this. Thomas Edison's lab burned down at 67, destroying irreplaceable work. His response, "Thank goodness all our mistakes were burned up, now we can start fresh." He rebuilt within months, producing some of his most prolific work. Or take Malala Yousafzai, who transformed an assassination attempt into a global platform for education. These aren't exceptions, they're demonstrations of a universal truth. The obstacles we face don't block our path, they reveal it. Try this reframe today. Identify one current struggle, a delayed promotion, a creative block, a strained relationship, and ask, what is this situation forcing me to develop that I wouldn't have learned otherwise? Maybe the delay is teaching you to advocate for yourself. The block is pushing you to explore new inspiration sources. The tension is highlighting boundaries you need to set. The obstacle isn't just something to overcome. It's the curriculum for who you're becoming. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire plagued by war and plague, yet his journals reveal a man who saw each crisis as a chance to practice virtue. That's the ultimate shift from, "Why is this happening to me?" to, "What is this preparing me for?" Because when you stop fighting the obstacles and start leveraging them, you don't just survive the fire. You emerge tempered, hardened, and infinitely more capable than before. Your mind is like a busy train station, thoughts constantly arriving, departing, lingering on the platforms. Now imagine mistaking every passenger for a permanent resident. That's what happens when we fuse with our thoughts, treating passing mental events as undeniable truths. Stoics called this phenomenon cognitive diffusion long before modern therapists coined the term. Epictetus captured it perfectly. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the opinions they form about them. Those opinions, they're just visitors, not homeowners. Consider the difference between two statements. I'm a failure versus I'm noticing a thought about failure. The first binds identity to a transient mental event, like nailing a "beware of dog" sign to your forehead because a stray bark crossed your mind. The second creates critical distance. You're not the thought, you're the observer of the thought. This subtle shift is revolutionary in high-pressure moments. A surgeon doesn't crumble when the thought, "this is too complex," arises. They acknowledge it like weather passing through, interesting, but not a directive. Ancient Stoics practiced this through a mental labeling. When a judgment arose, "this crowd will mock me," they'd prefix it with "nature presents me with the impression that." Modern psychology confirms the power of this technique. Brain scans show that adding "I'm having the thought that" before anxious statements reduces amygdala activation by nearly 30%. It's why Navy SEAL verbalize fears during Hell Week, noticing my mind predicting collapse, transforming terror into data. Try this reframe today. Identify one recurring intrusive thought. Perhaps, "I'm not qualified for this promotion," or "everyone thinks I'm bluffing." Now experiment with linguistic tweaks. Add "my mind is telling me." Use third-person perspective. Your name is experiencing doubt about. Personify the thought. My old friend imposter syndrome is knocking again." Epictetus advised treating opinions like unwelcome house guests. You acknowledge their presence without offering them the guest room. So here's your challenge. What mental script has been overstaying its welcome in your mind? That voice whispering you're not ready, not good enough, not destined for success. Give it a ridiculous nickname. Visualize it as a grumpy cartoon character. The moment you stop treating thoughts as orders and start seeing them as suggestions, you reclaim the authority to choose which ones deserve your attention. Because in the courtroom of your mind, you're not the defendant, you're the judge. Imagine your mind as a cluttered attic. Every distraction, every unnecessary commitment, every trivial worry piled up until there's barely room to move. Now picture Seneca walking in with a lantern and a simple question. What here is truly essential? That's the art of subtraction, a Stoic tactic so counterintuitive yet transformative that it flips conventional wisdom on its head. We're conditioned to believe focus comes from adding more productivity hacks, more discipline techniques, more tools. But Seneca argued the opposite. Life is long if you know how to use it. And the secret to using it well isn't accumulation, it's elimination. Consider the modern worker drowning in digital noise. They install 5 focus apps, subscribe to 3 productivity newsletters, and bookmark endless time management guides, yet still feel scattered. Now contrast that with the writer who deletes social media before starting a novel, or the CEO who blocks off untouchable hours by canceling low-impact meetings. Subtraction isn't about deprivation, it's about creating white space for what matters. The ancient Stoics didn't have smartphones, but they understood distraction's root cause. We mistake busyness for purpose and clutter for substance. Take Marcus Aurelius' journaling habit. He didn't fill pages with endless reflections, he distilled wisdom into concise prompts and reminders. Or consider Epictetus' teaching style. He didn't overwhelm students with complex theories, he stripped philosophy down to actionable principles. This is subtraction as a precision tool, removing the non-essential so the essential can shine. Modern research validates this. A Princeton Neuroscience Institute study found that physical clutter competes for attention, reducing focus and increasing cognitive load. The more you remove, the clearer your mind becomes. So where can you apply this today? Start with one question. What's one thing I can remove to gain clarity? Maybe it's turning off notifications after 7 p.m., not to disconnect from life but to reconnect with family. Maybe it's saying no to a committee that drains your energy, creating space for passion projects. Even small subtractions compound. The entrepreneur who stops checking email first thing in the morning might discover their most creative hours. The student who quits multitasking during study sessions could find concepts clicking faster. Subtraction reveals a profound truth. Focus isn't something you create, it's something you uncover by clearing away the debris. Like Michelangelo chiseling marble to free the statue within, every distraction you remove unveils your innate capacity for deep work. Seneca wasn't just offering time management advice, he was pointing to a radical way of living. When you stop trying to do it all, you start doing what matters, with a clarity that feels less like effort and more like breathing. So tonight, as you plan tomorrow's to-do list, try this twist. Make a stop doing list instead. What meetings can you decline? What apps can you silence? What outdated expectations can you release? The art of subtraction doesn't just free up time. It reveals who you are beneath the noise, and in that space, focus isn't a skill you learn. It's the natural state you rediscover. There's a subtle but profound shift that happens when you attach two words to any ambition: fate permitting. The Stoics called this the reserve clause, and it's not about hedging your bets or undermining confidence. It's about aligning your expectations with reality. Picture an entrepreneur preparing to launch their dream venture. They could declare, "This will be a massive success," setting themselves up for crushing disappointment if market shifts or supply chain issues arise. Or they could phrase it differently: "I'll give this everything I have and it will succeed, fate permitting." That tiny addition changes everything. It's the difference between demanding certainty and embracing effort. Epictetus, who taught that our peace depends on distinguishing what's within our control from what isn't, put it bluntly: when you set about anything, remind yourself of what the nature of the action is. He wasn't suggesting half-hearted effort. He was advocating wholehearted engagement while releasing death grip on outcomes. Think of a farmer planting seeds. They can till the soil, water diligently, and fertilize perfectly, but they can't command rain. The reserve clause mirrors that wisdom. I'll do my part and the harvest will come, weather permitting. This mindset isn't passivity, it's emotional insurance. Consider two surgeons preparing for a complex operation. One insists, "This will go perfectly," while the other thinks, "I'll execute every step flawlessly, barring unforeseen complications." The second isn't less confident, they're more resilient. When unexpected challenges arise, as they often do, the first surgeon might freeze or spiral, their rigid expectations shattered. The second adapts, their mental framework already accounting for life's unpredictability. So how does this reduce anxiety? Imagine standing before a packed auditorium to speak. Your usual inner monologue might whisper, "They have to love this presentation." That "have to" is a pressure cooker. It leaves no room for human reactions, technical glitches, or off days. Now try the reserve clause. "I'll deliver this with all my skill, audience response permitting." Suddenly, the weight lifts. You're accountable for your preparation, not others' perceptions. Modern psychology backs this approach. Studies on goal shielding show that overly rigid expectations trigger stress hormones when obstacles appear, while flexible thinking activates problem-solving regions of the brain. The reserve clause isn't defeatism, it's cognitive flexibility training. It's the athlete who says, "I'll push my personal best, injury permitting," or the parent who affirms, "I'll be patient tonight, toddler meltdowns permitting." Try this today. Pick one goal you're clinging to tightly, a promotion, a relationship milestone, a creative project's reception, and mentally append, fate permitting. Notice how it shifts your emotional posture. You're not surrendering agency, you're surrendering illusion, because real power lies not in dictating life's terms, but in mastering your response to whatever terms it offers. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The cucumber is bitter, then throw it out. There are brambles in your path, then go around." The reserve clause is that simple adjustment, committing to your path while leaving room to navigate the terrain as it actually is, not as you demand it to be. Epictetus carved the path to focus into three distinct yet interconnected disciplines: desire, action, and assent. Think of them as the three legs of a stool. Remove one, and the whole structure wobbles. The discipline of desire asks, "What do I truly want?" Not surface-level goals like wealth or fame, but the deeper alignment with what's within your control. An Olympic sprinter doesn't crave gold medals, they crave the perfect execution of their form, the milliseconds shaved off through relentless training. The medal, that's fate's domain. The discipline of action demands, how will I move toward that desire? It's the daily grind, the reps, the habits forged in the fire of consistency. That same sprinter doesn't just dream of speed. They show up at dawn, muscles burning, lungs searing because the track doesn't lie. And then there's the discipline of assent, the gatekeeper of perception. It whispers, how will I interpret what happens? When rain cancels practice or a rival sets a world record, assent decides whether those events derail focus or sharpen it. Modern life constantly tests this triad. Consider a startup founder. Their desire shouldn't be unicorn status, but creating value through innovation, something entirely within their power. Their action, the 100th pitch to investors, the code rewritten after a critical bug, and when the market crashes or a competitor steals their idea. Assent steps in, reframing setbacks as data, not defeat. The founder who masters this triad doesn't just build a company, they build an unshakable mindset. Where does this apply to you? Maybe you're fixated on a promotion desire, but are you equally committed to the skills required to earn it, action? And when the promotion goes to someone else, does your assent spiral into resentment or pivot toward growth? Epictetus' framework reveals a truth. Focus isn't just about narrowing your vision, it's about aligning your wants, your efforts, and your interpretations into a single, unbreakable thread. So here's the challenge of these three disciplines: which feels most out of balance in your life right now? Are your desires pulling you toward uncontrollable outcomes? Are your actions inconsistent with your stated goals, or does your assent crumble when reality doesn't match expectations? Pick one, strengthen it, watch how the other two rise to meet it. Because when desire, action, and assent move in harmony, distraction doesn't stand a chance. Marcus Aurelius left us with a challenge disguised as a simple observation. The obstacle in the path becomes the path. That's the essence of the Stoic test, not just enduring stress, but recognizing it as a pop quiz for your character. Think of those moments when everything seems to conspire against you. The cancelled flight, the unexpected bill, the coworker who takes credit for your work. The average person sees these as nuisances, interruptions to their real life. The Stoic sees them as the curriculum itself. Take a parent dealing with a toddler's tantrum in the cereal aisle. On the surface, it's a test of patience, but zoom out, it's also training in emotional regulation, a masterclass in choosing responses over reactions. Every time they kneel to eye level instead of snapping, every deep breath they take while tiny fists pound the shopping cart, they're not just managing a meltdown. They're forging the kind of composure that will serve them in boardroom negotiations or personal crises years later. That's the alchemy of this practice, transforming daily irritations into a gym for your virtues. History's greatest leaders understood this instinctively. Nelson Mandela didn't view his prison years as stolen time. He called them his university, where he honed the strategic patience that would later dismantle apartheid. Or consider Marie Curie, who worked in a freezing shed with leaky equipment, reframing each setback as data guiding her toward radium. These weren't superhumans, they were people who chose to see adversity as an exam they were meant to pass. Here's how to apply this today. First, identify your current Stoic exam. Maybe it's the micromanaging boss who's teaching you diplomacy under fire. Perhaps it's the financial pinch forcing you to distinguish wants from needs with newfound clarity. Even chronic pain can become a laboratory for observing your mind's relationship with discomfort. The key is to ask not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What is this revealing and strengthening in me?" Modern psychology backs this approach. Studies on post-traumatic growth show that individuals who view hardships as challenges rather than threats develop greater resilience, creativity, and emotional intelligence. It's not about pretending difficulties don't hurt. It's about recognizing that the hurt itself is part of the training. Like a muscle tearing to rebuild stronger, character requires friction to grow. So tonight, try this reframe. Recall one persistent frustration, the neighbor's loud music, the project stuck in revision limbo, and reclassify it, not as an obstacle, but as a personalized training module. What's it cultivating in you? Patience, adaptability, humor. The Stoic test isn't pass/fail. It's an ongoing enrollment where every challenge is both the lesson and the exam. And the reward isn't a grade, it's the unshakable self you become along the way. The moment your inbox pings with that passive-aggressive email from a colleague, your fingers twitch toward the keyboard, but then you pause. Not just any pause, a two-step Stoic pause. First, you notice, my chest is tight, my jaw is clenched. Then you judge, this isn't urgent, this isn't about me. That tiny gap between stimulus and response, that's where your power lies. Seneca called anger brief insanity, because in that white-hot moment, we mistake irritation for emergency, petty remarks for declarations of war. The two-step pause is your mental circuit breaker. It stops the surge before it fries your circuits. Think of it like a courtroom. The first step is the witness stand. You simply observe the facts, your racing pulse, the email's tone, the heat in your face. No embellishment, no dramatization. The second step is the judge's bench. You deliberate. Is this worth your energy? Is your reaction proportional? Most conflicts aren't battles. They're misunderstandings masquerading as threats. The pause strips away the costume. History's greatest leaders wielded this tool. When Julius Caesar received a letter revealing a plot against him, he didn't erupt in rage or panic. Plutarch recounts how he sat silently, weighing the information before calmly calling a meeting. That's the pause in action, not suppressing emotion, but refusing to let it dictate strategy. Modern neuroscience explains why this works. Labeling an emotion, step 1, reduces amygdala activity by nearly half, while deliberate judgment, step 2, engages the prefrontal cortex, your brain's rational commander. So where does your autopilot rush to judgment? Maybe it's road rage over a minor cut-off, or interpreting a friend's cancelled plan as rejection. Try this today. Install a 2-second buffer between provocation and reaction. Before replying to that snippy text, say aloud, I notice frustration, then ask, does this deserve my best self? The answer might surprise you. Seneca warned, anger is like ruining your own house to evict a rat. The two-step pause doesn't just spare the house, it reminds you the rat was never worth evicting in the first place. Every irritation is an invitation to either escalate or emancipate yourself. And in that choice lies your freedom. Ever catch yourself giving far wiser advice to others than you'd ever follow yourself? There's a reason for that distance. When we step outside our own tangled emotions and imagine advising a friend, clarity appears like fog lifting. The Stoics harnessed this phenomenon with a simple twist: third-person self-talk. Marcus Aurelius didn't just journal his thoughts, he often wrote as if addressing himself by name. Marcus, stop worrying about what others think. That tiny shift from I to he or you creates psychological space, turning a swirl of subjective panic into objective strategy. Take a modern example: a manager paralyzed by indecision before laying off staff. Their inner monologue might spiral: "I'm a monster for doing this." But reframed through the third-person lens, what would you tell another leader facing this impossible choice? The noise dims. Suddenly, practical insights emerge. Communicate with transparency, offer severance, treat people with dignity. The emotional charge dissipates because you're no longer drowning in the story, you're observing it from the shore. This tactic isn't just philosophical, it's neurologically potent. Research from Michigan State University shows that third-person self-talk reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, while boosting prefrontal cortex engagement. It's why athletes like LeBron James famously analyze their own performances as if reviewing game tape. LeBron needs to drive to the basket more. That slight detachment transforms self-critique into actionable coaching. Try this today. Identify a current struggle, a conflict, a creative block, a financial worry, and ask, if my best friend came to me with this problem, what would I say? Then go further. Channel a Stoic mentor. Channel Marcus Aurelius himself. How would he frame this challenge, not as a personal indictment, but as raw material for practicing wisdom? The moment you stop being the actor in your drama and become the advisor to your own life, pressure loses its fangs, because the truth is you already know the answers. You just need to hear them in a voice you trust. Picture a figure standing just behind your shoulder in moments of pressure, not judging, not interfering, but radiating calm focus like a lighthouse cutting through fog. That's the Stoic sage, an imagined embodiment of wisdom the Stoics used as a mental compass. Epictetus urged his students to set a certain character and pattern before you when facing challenges, and this visualization is precisely that: a psychological North Star guiding you back to clarity when emotions threaten to pull you off course. Think of how athletes channel their idols during critical moments. A basketball player at the free throw line might briefly conjure Kobe Bryant's icy focus. A young scientist facing skepticism might summon Marie Curie's quiet determination in her dimly lit lab. The sage visualization works the same way, but with a twist. You're not just recalling a hero's actions, you're inhabiting their mindset. When your hands shake before a big presentation, you don't just ask, "What would Warren Buffett do?" You imagine his deliberate pacing, his unhurried speech, his ability to treat complex ideas with simplicity. Then you step into that energy. History's greatest minds relied on this technique long before psychology coined modeling. Benjamin Franklin kept a list of virtues he admired in others, reviewing them daily like a mirror for his own behavior. Marcus Aurelius filled his journals with references to mentors, his adoptive father's steady temper, his teacher's humility, as living templates for his own growth. The power lies in specificity. Don't just visualize wisdom. Picture the exact set of your mentor's shoulders when delivering hard news. Hear the measured cadence of their voice in conflict. Notice how they pause before responding to provocation. These tangible details transform an abstract ideal into a wearable cloak of resilience. Here's how to practice this today. First, identify your personal sage, real or historical. Maybe it's the unflappable nurse who treated your childhood scrapes, or Lincoln's legendary patience during cabinet disputes. Then, before your next high-stakes moment, close your eyes and ask, how would they inhabit this situation? Not as a rigid script, but as a posture, an attitude, a way of moving through friction. The goal isn't imitation, it's activation. You're not pretending to be someone else, you're accessing latent strength your sage example reveals within you. Modern neuroscience explains why this works. Mirror neuron research shows our brains simulate observed behaviors, priming us to replicate them. When you vividly imagine your sage calm, you're not just daydreaming, you're rehearsing neural pathways for composure. It's why coaches film athletes watching footage of champions. The mental rehearsal shapes physical performance. Your version might involve reading Lincoln's letters before a negotiation, or watching a clip of Fred Rogers disarming anger with listening. The medium matters less than the immersion. So who's your sage? Is it the grandmother who weathered wars with quiet grace, the teacher who turned chaos into curiosity? Or perhaps a composite, the strategic mind of Sun Tzu blended with the compassion of Mr. Rogers. Whoever they are, their power lies not in perfection, but in the proof they offer. That calm focus is possible, even when the world feels anything but calm. And in that possibility, you'll find your own strength waiting to be claimed. There's a peculiar magic that happens when you impose a 24-hour buffer between provocation and response, like watching storm clouds part to reveal blue sky. The Stoics called this the 24-hour rule, and it's not about suppressing emotions. It's about giving them time to settle like sediment in a glass of water. Imagine a manager receiving scathing feedback in a team meeting. Their face flushes, their grip tightens around their pen, every instinct screams to defend their decisions immediately. But instead, they write a draft reply and let it sit overnight. By morning, the sting has dulled. The emotional static fades, leaving only the signal. 2 valid critiques buried in 6 hyperbolic accusations. That's the power of delay. It turns reactive fuel into reflective wisdom. Seneca, who advised Emperor Nero during some of history's most politically charged moments, described time as nature's medicine. He wasn't advocating procrastination, he was prescribing perspective. Think of anger as a fire. In the first spark, it feels all-consuming, imperative to act upon. But left untended, most emotional fires burn themselves out. The 24-hour rule is simply refusing to pour gasoline on something that would have smoldered on its own. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies on affective forecasting show we consistently overestimate how long negative emotions will last. What feels like a career-ending humiliation at 4 p.m. often shrinks to a minor blip by lunch the next day. Consider how this plays out in everyday conflicts. The spouse who waits a day to discuss a hurtful comment discovers the words weren't meant as cruelty, but clumsiness. The entrepreneur who sleeps on a client's abrupt cancellation wakes with fresh ideas for salvaging the relationship. Even historical leaders relied on this tactic. Abraham Lincoln wrote his famous hot letters, scathing responses to generals or politicians, then filed them away unsent. The act of writing exercised the emotion. The delay prevented permanent damage. So where have you rushed reactions you later regretted? That snarky email to a colleague, the impulsive resignation during a stressful week. Try this reframe. Strong emotions are like ocean waves. They'll carry you out if you fight them, but if you float, they'll deposit you back on shore. The 24-hour rule isn't passive avoidance. It's active trust in your future self's clarity. Tonight, place a notepad by your bed labeled "Tomorrow's Problem." When anger or anxiety strikes, jot down your raw reaction, then close the page. Come morning, you'll marvel at how many emergencies dissolved into ordinary challenges. Because, as Marcus Aurelius noted, nearly all our so-called suffering comes from misjudging time. What feels irreversible in the heat of the moment often becomes irrelevant with a single rotation of the earth. And in that space between impulse and action, you'll find something rare, the version of you who always knows what to do. Your circle of influence is like a flashlight in a dark room. It doesn't expand the walls, but it shows you exactly where to step next. Stephen Covey popularized this concept, but the Stoics were mapping it out centuries earlier when they distinguished between what's within our control and what isn't. Here's the twist: your circle isn't fixed. It's a living boundary you can sharpen with daily practice. Take the writer receiving harsh critiques. They could spend hours obsessing over every negative comment, trying to please faceless critics, or they could tighten their circle to the only thing that truly matters: the next sentence they write, the next draft they refine. That's the Stoic edit to Covey's framework, not just identifying your sphere of control, but ruthlessly prioritizing it. Think of a nurse during a chaotic shift. The circle of influence isn't hospital policy, staffing shortages, or even patient outcomes. It's the precision of their next Roman 4 insertion, the warmth in their voice during a difficult conversation, the thoroughness of their charting. Every profession has this divide. The entrepreneur can't control market crashes, but they can control their morning routine, the 2 hours of deep work before the world starts making demands. The teacher can't single-handedly reform education systems, but they can choose to be fully present for the student in front of them. The tighter the circle, the more powerful the focus. Marcus Aurelius modeled this with his famous dichotomy. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Modern psychology validates this. Studies on locus of control show that people who concentrate on actionable areas experience less stress and higher achievement. It's why elite athletes focus on their form, not the referee's calls, and why successful investors stick to their strategy, not the day's market noise. The circle of influence isn't about ignoring reality. It's about directing your energy where it can actually move the needle. So here's the challenge: grab a pen and draw 2 concentric circles. Label the inner one, influence, the things you can directly impact today, your effort, your attitude, your preparation. The outer ring, concern, the things that matter but aren't yours to solve, others' opinions, global events, past mistakes. Now here's the radical part: spend 80% of your mental calories inside that inner circle. The writer crafting paragraphs instead of refreshing reviews. The parent focusing on bedtime stories rather than societal pressures. The leader refining their vision instead of fixating on competitors. Epictetus offered a litmus test. If it's not up to you, don't claim it as your own. That's the heart of this tactic. Every morning, ask, what's inside my circle today? Maybe it's the patience to listen before reacting, the discipline to tackle the hardest task first, or the courage to delete distractions. Because when you stop watering dead plants, when you stop pouring energy into soil that can't grow anything, you'll find your real garden flourishing. The secret isn't expanding your circle. It's tending to the part that's already yours. In the middle of a raging storm, sailors don't search for new tools, they drop anchor. The Stoics understood this instinct deeply, crafting what we might call the Stoic anchor, a physical or mental trigger to tether you back to the present when chaos threatens to sweep you away. Marcus Aurelius described it as returning to yourself when distractions pull you under, and he practiced it daily. For him, it might have been the weight of his signet ring against his finger, a tangible reminder of his principles amid the whirlwind of empire. But this isn't just ancient wisdom, it's a neurological hack. When your brain's amygdala screams danger, a physical anchor, like a judge touching their robe before delivering a verdict, grounds you in the moment, short-circuiting the panic loop. Consider how this plays out in real time. A surgeon scrubbing in might pause to feel the cool metal of their wedding band, a silent cue to steady their hands and sharpen their focus. A public speaker backstage might press their thumb and forefinger together, creating a somatic signal to quiet the inner critic. These anchors aren't magical talismans, they're deliberate bridges between intention and action. Modern research on embodied cognition shows why this works. Physical sensations directly influence emotional states. Clenching a fist can summon determination. Standing tall can summon confidence, and a simple, repeatable touchpoint like Marcus' ring can summon clarity. So what makes an effective Stoic anchor? First, it must be portable and discreet, something you can access mid-meeting or mid-crisis without drawing attention. A CEO might use the deliberate adjustment of their glasses. A parent might trace a small scar on their palm, a reminder of past resilience. Second, it should carry personal meaning. For Marcus, the ring symbolized duty. For you, it might be a wristband engraved with a mantra, or even the feel of your feet planted firmly on the ground. The key is consistency. Every time you activate that anchor, whether it's a breath held for 3 seconds or the texture of a worry stone, you're training your nervous system to associate it with calm focus. Here's the challenge. Identify one chaotic moment from your recent past: a heated argument, a high-pressure presentation, a sudden setback, and ask, what physical cue could have recentered me? Maybe it's the weight of your phone in your pocket, repurposed as a reminder to pause before reacting. Maybe it's the taste of mint from gum, signaling your brain to shift gears. Like a climber hammering pitons into rock, your anchor creates secure points to hold onto when the emotional terrain gets steep. Marcus wrote, "Nowhere can you retreat more peacefully than within your own mind." But sometimes the mind needs a handhold to find its way back. That's the power of the Stoic anchor, not just a tool for survival, but a compass pointing you toward your best self, no matter how fierce the storm. Mel Robbins' 5-second rule meets Stoic philosophy in a powerful collision where modern behavioral science shakes hands with ancient wisdom. Picture this: you're in a team meeting, and a brilliant idea flashes through your mind. But as seconds tick by, hesitation creeps in. What if it's stupid? What if someone already said it? That's when the countdown begins, not from 5, but from 5,000. That's how many years this tactic has been quietly waiting for its moment. The Stoics didn't have digital timers, but they practiced something remarkably similar: immediate virtuous action. Epictetus taught that between impulse and action lies the battlefield where character is won or lost. Counting backward from 5 is your armor on that field. Here's how to weaponize this simplicity with Stoic intent. When you feel the familiar freeze, whether it's voicing an unpopular opinion, asking for that raise, or walking into a room full of strangers, start the countdown. But unlike Robbins' original method focused on overcoming procrastination, the Stoic version asks a crucial question mid-count: what would courage look like here? Not just action for action's sake, but action aligned with wisdom, justice, or whatever virtue the moment demands. 5, 4, you notice your palms sweating. 3, 2, you recall Marcus Aurelius writing, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be 1, and you speak. Consider a nurse spotting a medication error but hesitating to correct a senior doctor." The 5-second countdown isn't just about mustering bravery, it's about connecting to the Stoic concept of prosoch, mindful attention. With each number, they mentally rehearse Hippocrates' oath. 5. First, do no harm. 4. The patient's safety is my duty. 3. Truth matters more than hierarchy. 2. My silence could cost a life. 1. Doctor, I believe this dosage needs verification. That's the difference between rushed reaction and virtuous action. Neuroscience explains why this works. The prefrontal cortex, your brain's executive control center, takes about 5 seconds to override the amygdala's fight-flight-freeze response. Counting backward disrupts panic loops, creating just enough space for reasoned choice. Ancient Stoics understood this gap intuitively. Seneca described it as the pause where wisdom enters, while modern brain scans show it's when neural pathways for rational thought finally light up. So where do you need a 5-second push today? Maybe it's hitting send on that vulnerable email draft or walking away from an unproductive argument. Try this twist during your next countdown. Attach a Stoic virtue to each number. 5. Courage to start. 4. Discipline to continue. 3. Wisdom to choose rightly. 2. Justice to consider others. 1. Action with integrity. The numbers become more than a timer, they're stepping stones across the river of hesitation. History's decisive moments often hinged on these brief windows. Rosa Parks' refusal to move wasn't spontaneous. It was the culmination of countless small acts of courage, each practiced in 5-second increments. Your moments may not make history books, but they write the story of your character. Because as Epictetus knew, it's not the grand gestures that define us, but the accumulated weight of tiny choices made when no one's watching, and the quiet countdowns that get us there. Words have weight, especially the ones we repeat to ourselves in moments of pressure. The Stoics understood this power, crafting personal mantras like mental armor against chaos. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned adversity into wisdom, put it bluntly: if you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them. And it is in your power to wipe out that judgment now. That's the essence of a Stoic mantra, not a denial of hardship, but a recalibration of perspective. Picture a combat medic in a war zone, hands trembling as they stabilize a wounded soldier amid explosions. Their training kicks in, but so does their mantra, a single word whispered like a heartbeat: steady. That word isn't just self-talk, it's a tether to clarity. It drowns out the noise, narrows their focus to the next stitch, the next pulse check. The mantra doesn't remove the danger, it removes the paralysis. Your personal phrase doesn't need poetic flourish. Marcus Aurelius' journals are littered with blunt reminders. Enough of this, no more excuses. The power lies in repetition and resonance. A CEO facing a boardroom mutiny might anchor themselves with one step at a time. A parent navigating a toddler's meltdown might repeat, "This is temporary." The simpler the phrase, the faster it cuts through panic static. Modern science confirms why this works. Studies on cognitive reappraisal show that succinct, emotionally neutral phrases reduce amygdala activation faster than complex affirmations. Navy SEAL use "slow is smooth, smooth is fast" to override panic's urge to rush. Surgeons murmur precision, not speed, when complications arise. These mantras aren't magic, they're mental switches flipping the brain from reactive to operational mode. So how do you craft yours? Start by mining your past resilience. Recall a crisis you've weathered. What thought pulled you through? Maybe it was, "I've survived worse," or "focus on what's next." If nothing surfaces, borrow from Stoic texts. Epictetus' "endure and renounce" works for relentless workloads. Seneca's "this also is change" fits life's abrupt pivots. Test drive phrases until one lands with a quiet click, like a key turning in a lock. Here's the test. When your heart races before a high-stakes moment, does the mantra slow your breathing? When overwhelm hits, does it create space between stimulus and response? Like a fire extinguisher behind glass, its value isn't in daily use, but in flawless function when the heat rises. Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Your mantra is that mastery distilled a whispered command to your scattered mind that says, "Not today." Not to the chaos, not to the fear, just this breath, just this step, just now. Consider the archer drawing their bow once more. This time, their focus isn't on the target, but on the perfection of their form. The Stoics called this shift the effort metric, and it's perhaps the most liberating recalibration you can make in a results-obsessed world. Seneca put it plainly, "We are often more frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." Translation: your worth isn't measured by where the arrow lands, but by the integrity of your release. Take a student pulling an all-nighter before finals. Society tells them their value lies in the letter grade, A for admirable, C for condemned. But the Stoic approach, they'd measure success by the hours spent mastering material, the questions asked in review sessions, the discipline to turn off distractions. That might involve luck, that effort, that's pure character. History's greatest innovators understood this. Thomas Edison didn't frame his 10,000 attempts as failures, but as evidence of relentless effort. "I have not failed," he'd say. "I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Here's where modern psychology collides with ancient wisdom. Studies on growth mindset reveal that individuals who focus on effort over innate talent show greater resilience and long-term achievement. A student praised for hard work outperforms one praised for being naturally smart, because effort is a variable they control, just as the Stoics advised. The athlete who celebrates personal bests over podium finishes, the writer who honors daily word counts over publication, deals there all practicing Seneca's insight. We are not given a short life, but we make it short by wasting our time on things beyond our control. So where have you been judging yourself by the wrong metric? That project your boss dismissed, did you undervalue the late nights refining it? The relationship that ended, did you overlook the vulnerability you risked? Effort is the only true currency you mint entirely yourself. Outcomes hinge on markets, moods, and sheer chance, but your commitment, that's yours alone. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal not to record victories, but to audit his efforts. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. Not become successful, but be diligent. Not win approval, but act with integrity. That's the effort metric in action, a compass that always points true north regardless of storms. Tonight, try this reframe. Recall one recent failure, then ask, what did I control in this situation? Maybe you prepared exhaustively for a pitch that fell flat, or trained relentlessly for a race cut short by injury. Honor that effort like a Stoic, not as consolation, but as the real victory. Because while trophies tarnish and records fade, the person you become through disciplined effort. That's a masterpiece no setback can erase. Fear is like a fog, it distorts distances, magnifies shadows, and turns ordinary obstacles into looming monsters. The Stoic antidote, not blind optimism, but a surgical approach called fear setting. A modern twist on ancient wisdom popularized by Tim Ferriss, though its roots stretch back to Seneca's letters. Here's how it works. Instead of running from your anxieties, you dissect them under cold, clinical light. Imagine a freelance graphic designer lying awake at 3 a.m., heart pounding over their biggest client potentially leaving. The unexamined fear spirals. I'll go bankrupt. My reputation will tank. I'll never recover. Fear setting interrupts that spiral with 3 brutal but liberating questions. What's the worst that could realistically happen? How would I mitigate it? What's the cost of inaction? Start with the nightmare scenario. The freelancer loses the client. Income drops by 40%. Now, mitigation, they'd slash discretionary spending, tap their emergency fund, and ramp up outreach to past clients. Suddenly, the monster has dimensions. It's not an infinite abyss, it's a challenge with edges you can grip. Next, weigh inaction's price. Staying paralyzed means no backup plans, no portfolio updates, no new pitches. The real risk isn't losing the client, it's refusing to prepare for the possibility. This exercise doesn't erase fear, it defangs it by proving you're more capable than your panic claims. Seneca practiced a version of this nightly. He'd mentally rehearse losing his wealth, status, even his family, not to dwell in gloom, but to discover a profound truth: I'd still survive. Modern psychology validates this. Studies on stress inoculation show that visualizing and planning for worst-case scenarios reduces anxiety by up to 30%. It's why Navy SEAL train for mission failures, why pilots simulate engine fires. Preparation isn't pessimism, it's empowerment. So where's your fear begging for this treatment? That career leap you're avoiding, the medical test you're postponing, grab a sheet of paper and divide it into 3 columns. Column 1, worst case. Column 2, prevent/mitigate. Column 3, opportunity cost of avoidance. Be mercilessly specific. If you fear public speaking, don't just write, I'll embarrass myself. Detail it. My voice will crack at minute 3. Then counter it. I'll practice that transition until it's muscle memory. The magic happens when you realize most fears are puzzles, not prophecies. History's boldest moves were often born from fear setting. Eleanor Roosevelt battled crippling shyness by methodically listing her social anxieties, then deliberately facing each one. Richard Branson nearly backed out of launching Virgin Records until he mapped his worst-case scenario. If this fails, I'll rebound with another venture. The exercise doesn't guarantee success, it guarantees perspective, because once you've stared down the worst and plotted your response, fear loses its veto power. You stop asking, what if it goes wrong, and start asking, then what will I do? Tonight, try Seneca's ritual with a modern twist. Light a candle, open your journal, and pick one fear that's been whispering lies in your ear. Give it shape, give it a solution, then watch as the fog lifts, leaving only the path forward clear, navigable, and yours to walk. Death doesn't just wait at the finish line, it walks beside you every day, tapping you on the shoulder with a simple reminder: this could be your last chapter. The Stoic deadline isn't about morbidity, it's about urgency forged from clarity. Marcus Aurelius scribbled it in his journal like a daily memo. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Imagine waking up each morning not to a to-do list but to a stark question. If today were my final day, would I still be doing this? Not as a hypothetical, but as a filter for everything: your projects, your conversations, even your silences. Take the novelist facing a blank page. Without the Stoic deadline, it's easy to procrastinate. I'll write tomorrow when inspiration strikes. But with the weight of mortality in the room, each sentence becomes vital. The writer isn't just crafting a chapter, they're etching their legacy. This isn't pressure, it's liberation. Hemingway reportedly wrote one true sentence each morning, knowing it might be his last. That's the deadline in action, not a threat but a focusing lens. Modern psychology confirms why this works. Studies on temporal motivation theory show that deadlines boost productivity by up to 40%, but artificial ones lack teeth. The Stoic deadline isn't a calendar reminder, it's a confrontation with the irreversible truth that time is the one resource you can't replenish. A CEO running a startup might ask, if I died tomorrow, would this meeting matter? The answer isn't always no, sometimes it's yes, so let's make it count. Here's how to wield this tool without despair. First, audit your routines, that hour spent scrolling. The grudges you rehearse, the projects collecting dust, hold them up to the light of what if this were my last week. Some will crumble to irrelevance. Others will sharpen into focus. Second, borrow from hospice nurses' observations. Few wish they'd worked more, but many regret time wasted on fear, pretense, or waiting for permission. The Stoic deadline turns those regrets into a compass, but beware the trap of urgency without direction. Marcus didn't say, do everything fast. He said, do what matters now. The composer writing their symphony isn't rushing, they're selecting each note with care, precisely because time is limited. Your version might be a conversation you've postponed, a skill you've delayed mastering, or even just sitting quietly with someone you love. Tonight, try this experiment. Set 2 alarms, one for tonight's bedtime labeled Last Chance Today, and one for tomorrow morning labeled Bonus Round. Between them, live as if the second alarm might never sound, not frantic but awake, not perfect but present, because the real power of the Stoic deadline isn't in the dying, it's in the reminder that you're alive right now, and that's the only time you've ever had to begin. The minimal viable day flips conventional productivity on its head. Instead of chasing endless to DOS, you identify the few essential actions that make a day worthwhile no matter what chaos unfolds. Seneca captured this perfectly. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. His point wasn't about squeezing more into each hour, it was about recognizing when enough truly is enough. Picture an ER nurse after a brutal double shift. The charts piled up, 3 patients coded, and she didn't get to half her tasks. But if she helped one terrified child breathe easier or reassured one family in the waiting room, that's her minimal viable day. Not the paperwork, not the metrics, just that irreducible core of human impact. This tactic isn't about lowering standards, it's about precision. Think of it like an emergency flashlight with 3 settings: survival, function, and flourish. On the hardest days, survival might mean 1 honest conversation or 30 minutes of focused work. Function could involve 3 critical tasks. Flourish. That's for days when the stars align, but the minimal viable day ensures that even when everything crumbles, you've hit what matters. A teacher's version might be 1 student truly heard. A writer's 1 paragraph that rings true. Seneca called this the measure of enough, not a bare minimum, but a distilled essence. Modern culture screams that more is always better. More emails, more hustle, more achievement. But the Stoics knew better. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not in some secluded retreat, but in military camps between battles. His minimal viable day wasn't conquering empires, it was returning to a single question: did I act with integrity today? You'll find this principle in unexpected places. The chef who judges a service not by covers served, but by dishes made with care. The CEO who lets quarterly reports wait, but never skips mentoring one promising employee. So here's the challenge: strip away the non-essential. Ask yourself, what's the one thing that, if accomplished today, would make me feel it wasn't wasted? Not the flashy achievements, the quiet victories. Maybe it's 10 minutes fully present with your kid at bedtime. Maybe it's finally sending that difficult apology text. The power lies in its simplicity. On days when the world feels like it's burning, your minimal viable day becomes an anchor, not because it's easy, but because it's unshakable. Seneca warned, life is long if you know how to use it. The minimal viable day isn't about doing less, it's about ensuring that whatever you do, no matter how small, carries the weight of meaning. Because when you define enough for yourself, you're no longer at the mercy of chaos. You found the signal in the noise. Every yes you give is a withdrawal from your finite account of focus, a truth Warren Buffett made famous with his 20-slot rule. Imagine being handed a punch card with just 20 slots representing your lifetime commitments. Each punch, whether launching a business, raising a child, or mastering a craft, would cost one irreplaceable slot. Suddenly, trivial requests evaporate. That's the power of the Stoic No, not rejection, but ruthless prioritization of what deserves your life's currency. Buffett's rule isn't about scarcity, it's about clarity. When you treat commitments like limited edition currency, you stop spending on distractions and invest in mastery. Epictetus cut even deeper. If you seek truth, be prepared to say no 1,000 times to things that don't matter. The Stoics recognized that refusal isn't rudeness, it's reverence for your purpose. Picture a novelist declining a lucrative speaking tour to finish their manuscript, or a surgeon turning down administrative roles to remain in the operating room. Their no isn't a closed door, it's a drawn boundary around their craft. Modern research validates this. A Harvard study found that top performers don't just say yes to the right things, they say no to almost everything else. Their secret isn't superior stamina, but superior discernment. Here's where most falter. We confuse busyness with productivity, mistaking a crowded calendar for a meaningful one. The Stoic No flips this script. Consider an architect asked to design a quick, profit-heavy project that clashes with their aesthetic principles. Saying yes might pad their bank account, but saying no preserves their creative integrity and, ironically, often leads to more fulfilling work. History's icons understood this. Beethoven refused to compose on demand for aristocrats, even when penniless. Marie Curie declined lucrative commercial offers to stay in her lab. Their refusals weren't stubbornness, they were the scaffolding for greatness. So how do you cultivate this discipline? Start with a 24-hour buffer for requests. When asked for your time, energy, or attention, respond with, "Let me check my priorities and get back to you." That pause, whether minutes or a day, creates space to ask the Stoic question, does this align with my core 20? If not, the answer is preordained, but here's the subtle art. The Stoic No isn't blunt, it's precise. Instead of "I can't," try "I don't," a phrasing psychologists found more empowering. "I don't take meetings before noon" lands differently than "I can't make it." Even Buffett softens his refusals with humor. "I've reached my punch card limit, but I'm honored you asked." Your challenge this week: audit your commitments like a Stoic accountant. That recurring committee meeting draining your energy, the guilt-driven coffee date, the quick favor that spirals into hours, each deserves the same test. If this cost one of my 20 slots, would I still invest? The moment you start treating your focus as the scarce, precious resource it truly is, every no becomes a sacred yes to something greater. Stress inoculation isn't about waiting for life to throw punches, it's about stepping into the ring on your own terms. Picture a musician shaking through their first open mic night, voice cracking as they strum in front of 20 bored coffee drinkers. Fast forward 6 months, those same hands now steady as they command a festival stage. The difference: they didn't just get used to pressure, they methodically trained their nervous system to interpret stress as fuel, not fire. Seneca saw this clearly. Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. He wasn't advocating needless suffering. He was prescribing deliberate exposure, like a vaccine introducing weakened viruses to build immunity. Think of how firefighters train. They don't start by running into burning skyscrapers, they drill in controlled environments, slowly increasing heat, smoke, and complexity until their bodies recognize chaos as familiar territory. The same principle applies to everyday challenges. That accountant terrified of client meetings, they start with one-on-one calls, then small group Zooms, then in-person presentations to friendly colleagues. Each step is a microdose of stress, teaching their physiology that elevated heart rate doesn't mean danger, it means engagement. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Gradual exposure rewires the amygdala's threat detection, turning panic into focus. The magic lies in the Goldilocks zone, challenges that are neither too soft nor overwhelming. A sales rep practicing objections with a mentor isn't just role-playing. They're building neural pathways to stay calm when real rejection hits. Even elite athletes use this tactic. Olympic swimmers don't debut at finals. They compete in increasingly intense meets until the starting gun triggers focus, not fear. Seneca's practiced suffering isn't masochism, it's the recognition that comfort zones shrink unless stretched. So where's your growth edge? Maybe it's finally volunteering to lead the weekly team huddle instead of hiding in the back. Or striking up conversations with strangers to dull social anxiety's sting. The key is progression. Start small enough to stay regulated, but challenging enough to spark adaptation. Like a vaccine's booster shots, each exposure compounds your resilience. Tonight, grab a notebook and sketch your stress inoculation plan. Identify one fear, networking events, difficult conversations, high-stakes decision-making, and break it into 5 escalating exposures. Week 1, watch a recorded panel discussion. Week 3, ask one question at a live webinar. Week 5, host a casual lunch with colleagues. By the final stage, what once felt paralyzing becomes performable not because the fear vanished, but because you've reprogrammed your response. Seneca warned, "We suffer more often in imagination than reality." Stress inoculation flips that script. The butterflies in your stomach aren't signals to flee. They're proof you're vaccinating yourself against fragility. So tell me, what's the next dose in your resilience regimen? That tiny, terrifying step you've been avoiding might just be the exact medicine your confidence needs. Imagine ending your day not with aimless scrolling or exhaustion, but with a ritual so precise it sharpens your focus like a whetstone on a blade. This is the Stoic Review, 3 questions that transform ordinary nights into masterclasses in self-awareness. Marcus Aurelius didn't just stumble upon wisdom, he mined it nightly in the quiet hours, scribbling in his journal. What did I control today? Where did my reactions miss the mark? What deserves my full attention tomorrow? These weren't passive reflections, they were surgical audits of his mind. Start with control, the cornerstone of Stoic practice. A teacher reviewing their day might realize they couldn't control a student's disruptive behavior, but they could control their response, choosing patience over frustration, curiosity over judgment. This distinction isn't about blame, it's about ownership. Modern psychology backs this. Studies show that people who regularly identify their locus of control experience less stress and higher motivation. The question, what did I control, isn't just retrospective, it trains your brain to spot agency in real time, like a musician learning to isolate individual notes in a symphony. Next, the mirror of reaction. Picture a nurse who snapped at a colleague during a hectic shift. The Stoic Review doesn't let that moment vanish into the fog of fatigue. Instead, it asks, what triggered that reaction? Was it the chaos or my own unmet need for rest? This isn't self-flagellation, it's pattern recognition. Epictetus taught that every emotional outburst is a clue, revealing where we've tied our peace to external conditions. By dissecting these moments nightly, you're not reliving failure, you're mapping your emotional blind spots like a navigator charting reefs. Finally, the pivot to tomorrow. Marcus didn't just dwell on the past, he used it to fuel intentionality. Your tomorrow's focus might be as simple as listen before responding in meetings or first-hour phone-free. The magic lies in specificity. A CEO might commit to one uninterrupted strategy session, while a parent chooses 10 minutes of undivided attention at bedtime. This third question bridges reflection and action, ensuring insights don't evaporate by dawn. Here's the deeper alchemy. The Stoic review isn't about perfection, it's about progression. Some nights your answers will be messy. You'll realize you wasted hours on distractions or let a trivial comment hijack your mood, but that's the point. Like blacksmiths tempering steel, we strengthen our focus by repeatedly exposing it to heat and pressure, then examining the results. Try this tonight. Set a phone reminder for 30 minutes before bed. Grab any scrap of paper, no ornate journal required, and answer those 3 questions with brutal brevity. The teacher might write, "Controlled my lesson plan, not Timmy's tantrum. Reacted poorly to the principal's email, projected old frustrations. Tomorrow, breathe before replying." In 60 seconds, you've distilled chaos into clarity. Marcus' evening ritual survived centuries because it works, not by adding another task to your day, but by transforming its end into a launchpad for tomorrow. The questions seem simple, but their cumulative effect is revolutionary. Over time, you're not just reviewing your days, you're architecting your character. Your phone rings not with a familiar tone, but with the jarring default sound you've been meaning to change. Instantly, your shoulders tense, your breath shortens, and your mind braces for another demand on your attention. That split-second reaction isn't random. It's conditioned, like Pavlov's dog salivating at a bell. Now imagine something radical. What if that same ringtone could become your cue, not for stress, but for calm? That's the power of the equanimity trigger, a Stoic tactic that hijacks life's interruptions and reprograms them as reminders of choice. Epictetus saw this clearly. It's not events that disturb people, but their conditioned judgments about them. Translation: your phone isn't stressful, your automatic response to it is. Picture a seasoned diplomat receiving devastating news mid-negotiation. The room holds its breath, waiting for a reaction, but their face remains as still as a mountain lake. That neutrality isn't suppression, it's mastery. They've trained their nervous system to treat shocking information like a chess player treats an opponent's move, not as a personal affront, but as data requiring strategic response. Their equanimity trigger might be subtle, a slow blink, a deliberate exhale, or even the weight of their pen in hand. These aren't just habits, they're psychological levers, flipping the switch from reactive to responsive. Modern neuroscience confirms why this works. Studies on anchoring show that pairing a neutral stimulus like touching your thumb and forefinger together with a calm state can eventually make the gesture itself induce relaxation. It's why firefighters train to take one controlled breath before charging into flames. That breath becomes a biological reset button under chaos. The Stoics anticipated this by 20 centuries. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the pause between event and response, while Epictetus drilled his students to greet disruptions with silence before speaking. They weren't just teaching patience, they were wiring new reflexes. So how do you build your equanimity trigger? Start by auditing your daily interruptions. The ping of a new email, the buzz of a notification, even the sigh of your alarm clock, each is a potential training ground. Choose one and assign it a new meaning. Let's say your Slack notification. Instead of lunging for the mouse, make it your cue to ground yourself. Feel your feet on the floor, straighten your posture, or whisper a Stoic mantra like, "This too is opportunity." At first, it'll feel unnatural, like writing with your non-dominant hand, but repetition rewires the brain. Within weeks, that once anxiety fear-inducing sound becomes a call to presence rather than panic. The real test comes when life delivers more than digital pings. A sudden bill arrives in the mail instead of spiraling. You touch your wrist, your chosen trigger, and remember, this is a problem to solve, not a personal indictment. A coworker snaps at you. Before retaliating, you press your tongue to the roof of your mouth, another trigger, and access your calm. These tiny actions create what psychologists call response inhibition, breaking the chain between stimulus and habitual reaction. Epictetus asked, "Why should we be angry at the world? It doesn't care about our anger any more than the mirror cares about our frowns." Your triggers don't have to control you, they can serve you. So tonight, pick one interruption that normally hijacks your peace and give it a new job. The doorbell ringing isn't just an intrusion, it's a reminder to stand tall before answering. Your inbox loading isn't just a demand, it's a prompt to breathe. Condition your calm as diligently as the world conditions your chaos, and watch as ordinary moments become opportunities to practice unshakable focus. The goal isn't to eliminate life's triggers, it's to make them work for you instead of against you. Imagine standing in a bustling kitchen as an order comes in extra spicy, no salt. The chef's hand instinctively reaches for the salt shaker out of habit, but then pauses, just for a beat. That fractional delay, barely noticeable, is the difference between a ruined dish and a perfect one. This is the Stoic speed bump in action, a deliberate, almost microscopic pause between impulse and action. Seneca called it observing the first movement of emotion, that initial flash of anger, desire, or fear that surges before reason catches up. The speed bump isn't about suppressing that surge. It's about creating just enough space to ask, is this reaction necessary? History's most composed figures mastered this art. When Julius Caesar received word that his rival Pompey had been assassinated, a moment that could have sparked triumphant gloating, he reportedly wept instead. That pause between news and reaction allowed him to access a deeper response, grief for the loss of a fellow Roman, not just a political adversary. The Stoic speed bump turns knee-jerk reactions into conscious choices. Modern neuroscience explains why this works. The amygdala's panic signals reach your brain's executive center about a quarter second before rational processing kicks in. That tiny gap is where your speed bump lives. So where do you need one? Maybe it's the reflexive yes to every request that leaves you overwhelmed, or the sharp email drafted in frustration that can't be unsent. Try this today. Identify your autopilot reactions, the ones that leave you thinking, "Why did I do that?" and install a mental speed bump. For the parent about to snap at their child's messy room, it might mean stepping into the hallway for 3 breaths. For the executive tempted to interrupt a colleague, it could be tracing the rim of their coffee cup before speaking. The format doesn't matter, the interruption of habit does. Seneca described emotions as waves. They'll carry you if you don't learn to swim. The speed bump is your first stroke. It's not about eliminating anger or excitement. It's about no longer being their puppet. Even something as simple as counting to 5 before responding to a text can short-circuit pettiness. Think of the surgeon who pauses to sanitize their hands, not just to cleanse, but to transition into a state of precision. Your speed bump is that ritual, a momentary checkpoint between stimulus and action. Here's the subtle power of this tactic. Over time, those pauses compound. What begins as a forced delay becomes second nature, like a musician's metronome training their rhythm until the tempo lives in their bones. The chef no longer needs to think before tasting. Their restraint is woven into their craft. So start small. Pick one repetitive moment today, the ding of a notification, the first flash of irritation in traffic, and insert your speed bump. not to avoid the emotion, but to ensure your response aligns with who you choose to be, not just what you initially feel. Because in that pause lies something rare, the freedom to act rather than react. Every decision you make is either a step toward your best self or a detour away from it, and the Stoics gave us a compass to tell the difference. Marcus Aurelius distilled wisdom into 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom to discern the right path, justice to act with fairness, courage to endure difficulty, and temperance to avoid excess. Together, they form the virtue filter, a mental sieve for choices big and small. Picture a corporate executive facing mass layoffs. The numbers demand cuts, but the human cost weighs heavy. Before signing the list, they pause and run it through the filter. Is this wise? Perhaps if it saves the company from collapse. Is it just? Only if every alternative has been exhausted and those impacted are treated with dignity. Does it require courage? Undoubtedly, easy choices rarely shape character. Is it temperate? Only if the cuts aren't deeper than absolutely necessary. That pause transforms a spreadsheet exercise into a moral reckoning. This framework thrives in ordinary moments too. The parent deciding whether to cover for their child's missed homework applies the same test. Wisdom might say accountability teaches more than rescue. Justice considers fairness to other students. Courage faces the discomfort of tough love. Temperance avoids overpunishment. Suddenly, a simple parenting choice becomes an exercise in virtue cultivation. The filter doesn't guarantee perfect answers, it guarantees intentionality. History's defining decisions often mirror this structure. When Lincoln drafted the Emancipation Proclamation, he wrestled with these very questions. Was it wise politically, arguably risky, just undeniably courageous? It ignited a firestorm. Temperate, it exempted border states to avoid overreach. The document wasn't flawless, but it was virtuous, and that made it historic. Here's how to activate this today. Identify one pending decision: hiring, relocating, even ending a relationship, and interrogate it through the 4 virtues. Wisdom asks, what's the most informed choice? Justice demands, who else is affected? Courage questions, what fear might be clouding me? Temperance probes, am I overcorrecting? The answers won't always align perfectly. That's where growth happens. A musician choosing between a lucrative tour and family time might find wisdom and justice in conflict. The filter doesn't eliminate dilemmas, it illuminates their dimensions. Marcus didn't just preach these virtues, he pressure tested them. Facing betrayal by trusted generals, he asked, what would justice look like without vengeance? Confronted with endless imperial luxuries, he practiced temperance by eating soldiers' rations. His journals reveal a man constantly sifting decisions through this grid, turning governance into philosophy in action. So here's your challenge. Pick a current struggle and ask which virtue it most demands. Is that difficult conversation lacking courage? That indulgence needing temperance? That snap judgment begging for wisdom? The virtue filter won't make life simpler, but it will make your choices clearer, one intentional pause at a time. Because when you stop asking what's easiest and start asking what's virtuous, you're no longer just making decisions, you're crafting character. There's a quiet power in stepping back from your own thoughts and emotions, as if you were a researcher studying a fascinating subject yourself. Epictetus captured this perfectly when he said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." But here's the twist: before you can do, you must first see, with the detached curiosity of a biologist observing a rare species. This is the essence of the Stoic witness, the practice of watching your internal reactions without immediately getting swept away by them. Take a day trader in the middle of a market crash. Screens flash red, numbers plummet, and the room erupts in panic. Their heart races, palms dampen, classic fight or flight signals screaming, "Sell everything now." But instead of acting, they pause and do something radical. They note the physical sensations like entries in a lab notebook, heart rate elevated, breathing shallow. Adrenaline surge detected. This simple act of observation creates a buffer between stimulus and response. By naming the panic without becoming it, they regain just enough clarity to ask, is selling truly wise or just instinctive? Often, the answer emerges when emotion stops drowning out reason. History's greatest decision-makers relied on this skill. Marcus Aurelius journaled not to vent, but to examine his own mind with clinical precision. He'd dissect his anger after a frustrating Senate meeting like a surgeon studying tissue. Samples, why did that comment trigger me? What insecurity does it reveal? Modern psychology confirms the potency of this approach. Studies show that labeling emotions reduces their intensity by up to 50%, effectively dimming the brain's alarm system. It's why elite athletes verbalize their nerves before big races. Noticing increased pre-race jitters, normal response to adrenaline, transforming fear into data. So where has this kind of observation saved you from a misstep? Maybe it was the heated argument where you caught yourself mid-sentence and thought, wait, why am I yelling? Or the impulsive purchase where you pause to ask, is this desire or boredom? The Stoic witness doesn't eliminate emotions. It prevents them from hijacking the steering wheel. Like a smoke detector alerting you to fire without causing the blaze, it grants awareness without amplification. Try this today. For the next strong emotion that arises, frustration, excitement, anxiety, practice narrating it in third person. He's feeling rushed because the deadline moved up. She's nervous about the presentation because she cares deeply. That tiny shift from I am angry to I notice anger changes everything. You're no longer trapped in the storm. You're the scientist taking notes on its patterns. Because when you witness your mind with Stoic detachment, you unlock a superpower, the ability to respond rather than react, to choose rather than default. And in that space between observation and action lies the freedom to act as your best self, not just your first impulse. Pressure isn't just something to survive, it's something to invite. That's the paradox at the heart of this tactic. The more you welcome pressure, the less power it has to paralyze you. Think of a basketball player at the free throw line with seconds left on the clock. The crowd is roaring, their heart is pounding, but instead of resisting the intensity, they lean into it. They don't just tolerate the moment, they crave it. That shift from dread to desire doesn't happen by accident. It's a deliberate reframe one Seneca hinted at when he wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." He wasn't just advising endurance, he was revealing a hidden truth. Pressure isn't your opponent, it's your coach. Consider how this plays out beyond the court. A musician with stage fright might spend years avoiding auditions, only to discover that the anxiety never fades, it just waits for them in the wings. But the performer who chooses to step into the spotlight night after night, they don't eliminate the nerves, they rewrite their relationship with them. The pounding heart becomes a drum roll for their artistry, the dry mouth, a reminder that this performance matters. What was once a threat morphs into fuel. Modern psychology calls this stress reappraisal, but the Stoics were there first. They understood that the stories we tell ourselves about pressure, this will destroy me versus this will reveal me, determine whether it crushes or elevates us. History's most resilient figures lived this paradox. Eleanor Roosevelt, who trembled at public speaking, deliberately booked engagements to confront her fear. Each speech wasn't just a test, it was proof she could survive the very thing that terrified her. Or take the emergency room doctor who thrives in chaos not despite the high stakes, but because of them. The pressure sharpens their focus, heightens their instincts, turns routine procedures into acts of precision. The difference lies in orientation. Resisting pressure creates tension. Embracing it creates flow. So how do you apply this? Start by identifying a situation where pressure currently feels like a weight, a deadline, a difficult conversation, a performance review. Now ask, what if this wasn't a threat but an invitation? An invitation to prove your preparation, to test your growth, to discover what you're truly capable of. The student cramming for finals might reframe their anxiety as excitement, their body's way of priming them for peak performance. The entrepreneur pitching investors might see their shaky hands not as weakness, but as evidence they're playing at the edge of their potential. Seneca challenged us, why should we be angry at the world? It doesn't care about our anger any more than the mirror cares about our frowns. Pressure, like the mirror, simply reflects back what we bring to it. Lean away and it looms larger. Lean in and something unexpected happens. It starts working for you instead of against you. So here's the question to carry forward. What's one situation in your life where you've been resisting pressure that might actually be preparing you for something greater? The answer could transform not just how you handle stress, but how you define it. Every great performance begins in silence, not the absence of sound, but the presence of intention. Picture a concert pianist backstage, fingers hovering above invisible keys as they take 3 deliberate breaths. The first breath releases the chatter of the outside world, the traffic, the nerves, the critic's face in the front row. The second breath grounds them in their body, the weight of their hands, the curve of their spine. The third breath sharpens their focus like a lens coming into focus. The music isn't just notes anymore. It's a story waiting to be told. That's the power of a Stoic ritual, not superstition, but a bridge between chaos and clarity. Marcus Aurelius crafted his own version of this daily. Before the sun rose, before the empire's demands came crashing in, he'd sit with a simple question: what is my work today? Not as a to-do list, but as a compass. He'd visualize the challenges ahead, the stubborn senator, the logistical nightmare of feeding Rome, and rehearse his virtues like a musician scales. Patience for bureaucracy, courage for tough decisions, temperance in luxury's tempting glow. This wasn't passive meditation. It was mental armor being strapped on piece by piece. Modern neuroscience reveals why these rituals work. The brain craves predictability. It's why surgeons scrub in the same way before operations, or why basketball players dribble a set number of times before free throws. Repetition builds neural pathways, turning conscious effort into unconscious competence. But the Stoic twist, they paired action with philosophy. A CEO's pre-meeting ritual might involve rereading their mission statement, not just sipping coffee. A parent's deep breath before disciplining their child becomes a reminder. This isn't just frustration, it's teaching. The ritual isn't about the motion, it's about the meaning woven into it. So what's yours? Maybe it's tracing the rim of your coffee mug while mentally affirming, "This hour is for deep work," or standing tall before a difficult conversation, feeling your feet rooted like an oak. Even something as subtle as adjusting your watch band can become a trigger, a physical cue that says, "Now I focus." The key is consistency and intentionality. Olympic diver Greg Louganis used to pat his head before each dive, not for luck, but to confirm his body was perfectly aligned. Your ritual doesn't need flair, it needs resonance. History's quiet achievers understood this. Maya Angelou rented a sparse hotel room to write, arriving at the same time each morning with a deck of cards and a thermos of sherry. The cards weren't for solitaire, they were for jotting down ideas. The sherry wasn't for intoxication, it was a sensory anchor. Over time, just entering that room flipped a switch in her brain. This is where creation happens. Your version might be simpler, a specific playlist before presentations, or reviewing 3 gratitude notes before bed. The magic lies in the pairing, a repeatable action with a deliberate mindset. Here's the challenge. Identify one high-stakes moment in your week, a weekly review, a tough workout, a crucial conversation, and design a 30-second ritual around it. Not to control the outcome, but to claim your presence, because when pressure mounts, you won't rise to the occasion, you'll default to your ritual, and in that default lies your power. Procrastination isn't just about laziness, it's a negotiation with yourself where the terms are always shifting. 1 minute you're convinced you'll start that project after lunch, then after dinner, then tomorrow. The Stoics cracked the code on this mental tug-of-war 20 centuries ago. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned hardship into wisdom, put it bluntly, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That mastery begins with what we'll call the anti-procrastination pact, a simple but ruthless agreement you make with your future self before resistance even has a chance to whisper excuses. Here's how it works. You draft an if-then contract so airtight that hesitation can't wiggle through. If I feel resistance, then I'll commit to just 5 minutes. If I want to check social media, then I'll write one sentence first. These aren't vague intentions, they're predetermined responses wired into your brain like reflexes. Take the novelist staring at a blank page, paralyzed by the weight of an entire chapter. Their pact might be absurdly small. If I sit down to write, then I only need to type one true sentence. Just one, but here's the secret: starting is the entire battle. Once that first sentence exists, momentum often takes over. The 5-minute timer expires, and you realize you're knee-deep in flow. This tactic thrives on a psychological loophole. Our brains are wired to follow through on commitments we've pre-committed to. It's why Odysseus had his crew tie him to the mast. He knew his future self might cave to the siren's song. Modern research calls this implementation intention, but the Stoics framed it as self-discipline in its purest form. When Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do," he was outlining the pact's essence, defining the action before the resistance hits. Consider how this plays out beyond writing. A programmer avoiding a bug-ridden codebase might pledge, "If I open my laptop, then I'll debug just one function." A student dreading study sessions could decree, "If I sit at my desk, then I'll review one concept." The brilliance lies in the pact's flexibility. It's not about the size of the action, but the inevitability of it. You're not promising to climb the whole mountain, just to lace up your boots. History's most prolific creators relied on variations of this pact. Victor Hugo wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame under an extreme version. He instructed his servant to hide his clothes so he couldn't leave the house until he'd hit his daily word count. Your version doesn't need draconian measures. Maybe it's leaving your phone in another room until you've completed your 5-minute task, or publicly announcing your goals so social accountability kicks in. The key is making the terms so clear that hesitation has no room to negotiate. So here's your challenge. Identify one task you've been avoiding: the looming tax forms, the awkward conversation, the half-finished project, and draft your anti-procrastination pact right now. Make it stupidly simple. If I walk past my guitar, then I'll play one scale. If I open my email, then I'll reply to just one message. The magic isn't in the scale of the action. It's in the act of honoring the agreement with yourself. Because every time you follow through, you're not just completing a task, you're reinforcing a far more powerful truth: that your word to yourself is unbreakable. And in that reliability lies the real victory. History's greatest leaders didn't navigate storms alone. They carried mental compasses in the form of role models. This is the power of the Stoic Mirror, a practice where you reflect on figures who embody the calm you aspire to, especially when pressure threatens to overwhelm. Picture Abraham Lincoln in the darkest days of the Civil War, his cabinet in chaos, casualty reports piling up. Instead of crumbling under the weight, he'd retreat to the telegraph office, where stories of General Grant's unshakable resolve at Vicksburg reminded him, this too can be endured. Lincoln wasn't just seeking inspiration, he was holding up a mirror to the version of himself he needed to become. Marcus Aurelius took this further, writing in his journals, "When you need encouragement, think of the qualities the people around you have. Nothing is as encouraging as when virtues are visibly embodied in the people around us." He wasn't talking about blind idolization, but strategic emulation. A soldier doesn't just admire a Medal of Honor recipient, they study the decisions that earned it. A CEO facing a boardroom revolt doesn't just recall Steve Jobs' innovation, they channel his poise during Apple's near collapse in the 90s. The Stoic Mirror isn't about comparison, it's about borrowing strength until your own grows sturdy enough to stand alone. Consider how this works in everyday life. A nurse navigating a chaotic ER might recall Florence Nightingale's relentless focus amid the Crimean War's horrors. A parent losing patience with a tantrum could mirror Mr. Rogers' deliberate calm. The key lies in specificity. Don't just ask, what would my hero do? Ask, how would they breathe right now? Where would they direct their attention? What words would they avoid? Role models are more than inspiration, they're blueprints for behavior. Modern psychology confirms this tactic's power. Studies on social learning theory show that observing calm in others, even through stories, reduces cortisol levels and improves problem solving under stress. Firefighters train rookies by recounting veterans' split-second decisions during infernos. Surgeons pass down tales of mentors who steadied their hands during unexpected complications. These narratives aren't just tributes, they're cognitive lifelines, proving composure is possible when the heat rises. So who's your Stoic mirror? Maybe it's a historical figure like Mandela, who turned prison into a university of the mind. Or someone closer, a grandparent who weathered hardship with quiet humor, a teacher who transformed setbacks into lessons. Whoever they are, keep their image close, not as a standard to guilt you, but as proof that grace under pressure isn't mythical, it's a muscle they built, and so can you. The next time chaos knocks, pause and ask, how would my role model meet this moment? Then step forward, not as them, but as the version of yourself they've helped you uncover. Imagine your focus as a bank account. Every activity makes a withdrawal or deposit, but most of us operate without checking the balance. That's where the Stoic energy audit comes in, a practice Seneca hinted at when he railed against time thieves, stealing our most precious resource, attention. He wasn't just complaining about interruptions, he was advocating for ruthless accounting of where mental energy flows and where it hemorrhages. Take a modern CEO who realized half their meetings were redundant, not just wasting hours, but draining the cognitive reserves needed for strategic decisions. By slashing unnecessary gatherings, they didn't just free up time, they reclaimed the mental clarity to spot opportunities others missed. The audit works because focus isn't just about eliminating distractions, it's about identifying the subtle leaks you've learned to tolerate. The constant email checks that fracture concentration. The quick social media scrolls that derail momentum for hours. Even seemingly productive tasks can be energy vampires if they don't align with priorities. A lawyer billing 60-hour weeks might feel efficient until they realize drafting routine contracts at midnight leaves them too drained for the high-stakes negotiations that truly move their career forward. Conducting your own audit is simple but revealing. For 3 days, track activities in 2 columns: energy boosters, tasks leaving you energized, and energy drainers, those leaving you depleted. Be brutally honest, that networking event you attend out of obligation, It might show up as a drain, while solo research sessions, though challenging, could emerge as unexpected boosters. The goal isn't to eliminate all draining tasks, some are unavoidable, but to rebalance the ratio. Like a financial budget, awareness precedes optimization. Seneca's version involved nightly reflections. What did I do today that deserves my limited life energy? His answer often exposed societal obligations masquerading as necessities, the endless banquets, the flattery exchanges with power brokers. Modern equivalents might include back-to-back Zoom calls that could be memos, or committee roles accepted out of guilt rather than impact, the deeper insight. Energy leaks aren't just productivity killers, they're existential theft, trading fragments of your one irreplaceable life for hollow busyness. So here's the pivotal question: what's your biggest focus leak? Not the obvious time wasters, but the subtle, habitual drains disguised as normalcy. Maybe it's the morning news ritual that leaves you agitated before work, or the quick problem-solving for colleagues that consumes your creative peak hours. The audit's power lies in its objectivity. When you see patterns on paper, change becomes non-negotiable, because guarding your focus isn't selfish. It's how you ensure your best energy flows where it matters most. There comes a moment in every creative process, every project, every pursuit when the brush must leave the canvas, when the final edit must be locked, when the hands must unclench and release the work into the world. This is the essence of the Stoic surrender, recognizing the precise juncture where effort transforms into obsession, where refinement crosses into futility. Picture a sculptor stepping back from a nearly finished statue, their chisel hovering over one last detail. The temptation to keep tweaking, smoothing, perfecting is overwhelming, but wisdom whispers that the next strike could be the one that ruins the harmony of the whole. That's surrender in action, not resignation, but reverence for the natural endpoint of labor. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned adversity into art, framed it with characteristic bluntness. If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid. At first glance, it sounds like a call to humility, but dig deeper, it's an invitation to release the death grip on control. The artist who endlessly tweaks their masterpiece isn't pursuing excellence anymore. They're avoiding the vulnerability of declaring something complete. The entrepreneur who delays a product launch for just one more feature isn't perfecting, they're procrastinating on Judgment Day. Stoic surrender isn't about lowering standards, it's about honoring the distinction between craftsmanship and compulsion. History's most enduring works often bear the fingerprints of this principle. Leonardo da Vinci famously considered the Mona Lisa unfinished, yet it was wrested from his hands and now hangs as one of humanity's crowning achievements. J.K. Rowling's editor had to physically take the manuscript of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix from her grip to meet printing deadlines. Even nature operates this way. A tree doesn't debate when to drop its fruit. It simply lets go when the time is ripe. The Stoic surrender mirrors this organic wisdom. Effort has its season, and so does release. So where are you overgripping? Is it the email draft you've rewritten 7 times, or the presentation you keep rehearsing past the point of mastery? Maybe it's the relationship you're trying to fix long after the other person has moved on. The telltale sign isn't diligence, it's exhaustion. The athlete who overtrains risks injury. The writer who over-edits bleeds the life from their prose. The parent who micromanages stifles their child's resilience. Surrender isn't failure, it's faith that you've done enough, that the universe or the audience or the market will meet you halfway. Modern psychology calls this the good enough principle, but the Stoics framed it more profoundly. It's the acceptance that perfection isn't the absence of flaws, but the presence of wholeness. A Japanese pottery practice called kintsugi takes broken ceramics and repairs them with gold, not hiding the cracks, but illuminating them as part of the object's history. That's Stoic surrender in physical form, the recognition that something can be complete because of its imperfections, not in spite of them. Tonight, try this litmus test. Pick one lingering project, one unresolved tension, one endless loop of tweaking, and ask, have I crossed the line from dedicated to desperate? Then channel Epictetus once more. Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and you will go on well. Because sometimes the bravest act isn't pushing forward, it's letting go. Stress shrinks under the weight of time. What feels like an emergency today often becomes a footnote tomorrow, if it's remembered at all. That's the power of the legacy lens, a Stoic tactic that forces you to zoom out until the present moment's chaos reveals its true scale. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, reminding himself that even the mightiest empires are blips in time when viewed from the cosmic perspective. Imagine a parent stepping over scattered toys, their initial irritation fading as they ask, will this mess matter when my child is grown? The answer doesn't just diffuse frustration. It redefines what deserves emotional real estate in a life that's already too short for false emergencies. This tactic isn't about dismissing genuine challenges. It's about separating earthquakes from tremors. Take two scenarios: a surgeon botching a critical procedure versus spilling coffee on their scrubs before rounds. One will haunt them for decades, the other evaporates before lunch. The legacy lens trains you to spot the difference instinctively. Modern psychology backs this approach. Studies show that people who practice temporal distancing, imagining how they'll feel about an event in the future, experience significantly lower stress responses. It's why seasoned AR nurses can calmly triage chaos. They've learned through experience that most crises won't even make next week's highlight reel. So how do you apply this today? Start by auditing your current worries through Marcus' blip filter, that passive-aggressive email from a colleague. Picture yourself a decade from now, struggling to recall the sender's name, let alone their tone, the delayed flight that ruined your itinerary. It'll be a punchline at dinner parties. Remember when we got stranded in Chicago and found that amazing jazz bar? Even significant setbacks often shrink when viewed through the legacy lens. A failed business venture might feel catastrophic now, but history's most successful entrepreneurs wear early failures like badges of honor, proof they dared greatly before finding their stride. But here's where the lens gets profound. It also illuminates what does deserve your focus. The parent ignoring toys to read one more bedtime story isn't being lazy. They're investing in moments that will echo across decades. The leader who lets a minor product flaw ship to avoid crushing their team's morale isn't cutting corners. They're prioritizing trust over perfection. The legacy lens doesn't just minimize pettiness, it maximizes meaning. Marcus didn't dismiss his imperial duties as trivial. He saw them as fleeting opportunities to act with integrity in a world where nothing lasts. Try this tonight. List 3 current stressors, then project forward. Which of these will I remember or care about in 10 years? That overdue bill. It'll be a forgotten line item. The awkward comment you made at the meeting. It's already faded from everyone's memory. But the apology you've been putting off, the creative project you're too scared to start. Those are the seeds of legacy. The lens doesn't just quiet noise, it amplifies the signals that truly matter. Because when you stop sweating the expirables, you free up energy for the eternals. And that's the real shift, not just weathering storms, but learning which clouds are worth chasing. So we've journeyed through 44 Stoic tactics, from mastering the dichotomy of control to embracing pressure as fuel. And if there's one truth that ties them all together, It's this: unyielding focus isn't something you're born with. It's something you build brick by brick through daily practice. Think of these strategies as falling into 4 pillars that hold up the Stoic approach to focus. First, control, recognizing the boundary between what's yours to command and what isn't, like the archer focusing on their aim, not the wind. Second, preparation. Whether it's premeditating challenges or stress inoculation, it's about training your mind before the storm hits. Third, perspective, the view from above, the legacy lens, the reminders that most stressors shrink when viewed through time's long lens. And finally, action, the discipline of Assent, the 5-second rule, the tiny choices that add up to unshakable concentration. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned adversity into his greatest teacher, put it perfectly: "No man is free who is not master of himself." That's the heart of it. Freedom isn't the absence of pressure, it's the ability to meet pressure with clarity and choice. And here's the good news: you don't need to master all 44 tactics at once. Start with one. Maybe this week you'll practice the 24-hour rule before reacting to provocations. Or perhaps you'll try the minimal viable day, distilling your priorities down to what truly moves the needle. The key is consistency, not perfection. Every time you pause before responding, every moment you zoom out to see the bigger picture, you're strengthening your focus like a muscle. Now it's your turn. Scroll down and tell us in the comments, which tactic will you put into practice this week? Let's turn this video into a living workshop. Share your wins, your struggles, and your breakthroughs. And if you found even one of these tools useful, hit subscribe, because this isn't just about focus, it's about reclaiming your time, your energy, and your peace of mind in a world that's constantly pulling you in 100 directions. The Stoics didn't just survive high-pressure situations, they thrived in them. And with these tools